well. We really appreciate that. In partnership with the Tshwane University of Technology. My name is Melissa Kendane. I'm the Group Manager for Strategic Communication at the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, the CSIR in short, but I am not alone. Joining me on this panel, we have Professor Dondolo. Welcome, Professor, and thank you very much for joining us. She's the TUT Faculty of Humanities Assistant Dean. She's joining us from TUT. On behalf of the Acting Director General of the GCIS, Nomonde Mnukwa, we have Tsehofatso Modubu, the Media Liaison Director at the GCIS. Welcome, Tseho, thank you very much. We also have Carol Mohlala from the MDDA. She's part of the MDDA Board of Directors. She's at the far end. Thank you very much, Carol. We also have Nico Kosa, the Chief Marketing Officer at Completely Agency, and she's also the former news editor of Soweto TV. She's right next to me. Thank you so much, Nico. Online, we have Lerato Fekisi. She's the SABC senior reporter. She is joining us virtually, and we will also be joined by Zanele Zwane from the German Development Cooperation. So you will inform us when Zanele has also arrived. So before I also just move forward, I'd like to request Prof. Dondolo to actually do a welcome and opening remarks for us as our lead from TUT. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you so much, Program Director. Good morning to everyone here, all the ladies here. Sometimes we often have gentlemen. If they are here today, also gentlemen. Program Director and facilitator of this event, Melissa Kentane. We are honored to have a distinguished guest and panel of speakers with us today, including Tsogofatso Modubu, Director, Media Engagement, GCIS. We also, in our program today, have the Chief Director of GCIS, Mr. William Baloyi, MDDA Board Member, Ms. Carol Mohlala, Chief Marketing Officer at Completely Agency and former news editor at Soweto Editor, Ms. Nico Kosa, the German Development Cooperation Representative, Ms. Zanele Zwane, Station Manager at Inanda FM, Ms. Tandega Msani, the News Editor at Soweto TV, Ms. Amanda Mazwane, SABC Reporter. She's joining us online, Ms. Lerato Fekisi, Acting HOD of Journalism and Integrated Communication, Dr. Maria Moshatoni, a former HOD of Department of Journalism, Dr. Lizette Odendaal. Guest joining us today, a student and the TUT community in our midst today. Allow me to safely say all protocol observed. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, welcome to the Tshwane University of Technology, a people's university that makes knowledge work and advances social and economic transformation. This year, as we transition from good to great, we proudly celebrate our 20th anniversary, marking 2 decades of dedication to academic excellence through relevant curricula, impactful research, and community engagement. As we commemorate this milestone, we are proud to recognize our own female leader at TUT-FM, who represent the exact excellence that we are honoring today. Building on this spirit of our own milestone and achievements as an institution, it is particularly fitting that we also gather today to celebrate 30 years of women's excellence in the community media landscape. Today's event, held in collaboration with the Government Communication and Information Systems, MDDA, and the Department of Journalism and Integrated Communication at the Faculty of Humanities, highlights both progress made and the enduring legacy of women in the community media sector. Despite their substantial influence, their excellence is often underreported. This event is a significant effort to ensure they are recognized as a formidable force in community media. The dark and gloomy days of apartheid cast long shadows of oppression, marginalizing certain groups, including women, in mainstream media. During this period, community media became a beacon of hope, advocating for freedom, promoting democratic consciousness, and challenging the unjust status quo. Although women entered the media landscape later, they have made extraordinary contributions, shaping South Africa's media and social fabric through their activism and resistance. One of the most prominent figures I could think of in this sector is Ruth First, whose legacy underscores the profound impact women have had on community media. As editor of The Guardian from 1947 to 1952, she used investigative journalism to expose racial segregation and the oppression of the Black working class, rallying support for marginalized communities and advocating for justice and equality. The Guardian was not just a newspaper, but a critical voice challenging entrenched powers, structures, and exposing systematic injustices. When we reflect on the progress of the last 3 decades, we must recognize the important link between community cohesion, social inclusion, and community media. We must confront the stubborn gender stereotypes and entrenched inequalities that have long hindered true equality in the media landscape. It is no longer sufficient to mainly nudge these issues. We need bold and decisive action. We must tackle these systematic challenges head on to ensure that women's voices are fully heard and valued in the media sector and beyond. As we celebrate Women's Day tomorrow, let us go beyond paying lip service. We should take concrete steps to elevate the role of women in various sectors, including community media. Their unwavering efforts highlight the need for more extensive and structural reforms in our media landscape. Their journey and ours demonstrate that women's voices are powerful and cannot be silenced. It is our responsibility to continue challenging outdated views and breaking through glass ceilings in community media and beyond. We are delighted to honor and celebrate the remarkable role these women have played in shaping the community media landscape. Their significant contribution have not only advanced the industry, but also paved the way for greater gender equality within the media sector. In this panel discussion that we're having today, I look forward to exploring the many contributions women have made to community media and addressing ways in which they remain invisible and unvoiced in media spaces. In conclusion, let us be inspired by the strengths of those who have gone before us as we reflect on our progress. Let us foster a media environment where every woman's voice is a testament to exceptional excellence, impactful contribution, unbreakable strength, and unyielding determination. Wathinta abafazi? Wathinta abafazi? Wathinta imbokodo. I thank you.
Prof, for that very, very, very insightful and eye-opening, welcoming remark. Ladies, so firstly, I think let me kick off by apologizing, especially to the people who arrived here on time. So we did start rather late. So what I'm going to be doing is just congesting the program just a little bit, and I'm sure that my panelists will flow with me and will continue to have these engagements in a fluid manner. I do encourage everyone to listen attentively, because we're going to be asking quizzes as we go along. There are prizes to be won for these quizzes. So I think the notepads are coming out, pens are coming out, people want to record and register, yes. So I will be having intermittent quizzes as we go through the sessions, just to see if you caught on anything, and where the answers come through, we will be giving you prizes, and we'll just keep going. All that rustling actually distracted me quite a bit. I saw people sat up. But I think it's just very important to reflect on what Prof was also saying to us, you know. But over the past few months, our country has been celebrating, reflecting on past wins and some of the challenges, but also holding discussions around the outlook and solutions around the various sectors and industries that exist in our country. The media and communication space is no different. It's one of the oldest to exist, because news is very important. Information is very important. It becomes the lifeblood. In fact, when I was in the defense space, you know, we used to talk about that if the country was ever attacked, the first place to get attacked probably would be us. And that's because we also had communications systems in those environments. So I was always taught that the first thing you knock down in a country is its communication system, because when people are not able to communicate, they cannot mobilize and they cannot unite. So that is the importance of the media and the communication environment that you're stepping into. So it's not a fluffy space. It's a space that actually unites people, it unites companies, it unites a country behind goals that it actually has to meet. So I really would like you to move into the space, understanding that. Maybe with a show of hands, how many of you here are your communication and PR students? Okay, that's quite a bit. I don't know if it's separated with the journalism or is it combined into one faculty? And the journalism students? Okay, so it's more or less. Who here is not a student? Okay, we've got 2 or 3 non-students, so the majority of the people here are students going into media and communication space. So I don't want to hijack, because I'm sure there's no mic roaming currently, because it would be nice to know that with the non-students, where they're actually coming from. So we'll get into that when our mics get ready, because I would like to be I am curious around that. So as we are celebrating Women's Month, my guy. Yeah, you know, do the things that need to be done. The pots must not be potting. Okay. So as we're celebrating Women's Month, we're also part of this 30 years of democracy that we're celebrating as a country. And it became important for us to look at the women operating in the space, but also the young women who will be stepping into our shoes as we move out, because the baton must always be passed. But it's very, very important for us to enlighten, to share, but also to hear your voices around your experiences as we share ours. So the purpose of really us gathering here is that we can share anecdotes. We talk about what's happening, whether it's in corporate or in media houses, what's happening in our spaces. And we reflect on some of those challenges and share solutions, but also you share some of what you think should be solutions for women in the media space. So that when we leave the space and you are coming in, we also leave a united and a safe environment for the guys who will come after us. And that's very important for us. But importantly, we're also going to be networking, because I think relationships are very important in the journey of safety and learning in media and communication for women. So as we go into the space of navigating these 30 years that we've been talking about, I think most of you were not here 30 years ago. I'm not sure if some of you were even here 20 years ago, but it's okay. That's understandable. That's understandable, but that's the important thing. We need to reflect on where do we come from before you were even there, and what are the things that have happened, so that when we look back at history, we're also able to see these are the mistakes that we don't repeat. These are the highlights, and these are the things that have worked, and that is what we want to drive. But taking us through the 30 years of democracy and freedom, I will ask Tsekhofat Zomodubi from the GCIS to just quickly give us some of those highlights and those journeys around the 30 years. Thank you, Tsekho.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Melissa. And to fellow panelists, good morning. Good morning to all students as well. In terms of government and its strides within 30 years, particularly looking at the media and communication sector, I think one of the things that is pivotal is the fact that freedom of expression has really expanded post-1994, because if you think about the era of apartheid, when there was a lot of censorship and certain voices were not allowed to speak, media was also slightly controlled, because there were certain papers that were aligned, obviously, to the agenda of a particular regime. We've seen that since 1994, the media landscape has actually expanded in South Africa. And we're able to also catch up with technological developments. We have a thriving, convergent media. We're actually now seeing that our media is even being challenged to move from print into the digital space. And it's simply because of this convergence. So as much as there's freedom of expression, we're also seeing shrinking of traditional platforms. So ours is a story of what the globe is experiencing. So I think we've done a lot as a country in terms of catching up on issues of freedom of expression, on issues of plurality within the media sector, and also ensuring that this space is open up to women. We rarely saw women really being in the forefront of journalism in this country. I think a lot of you also growing up would see women being newsreaders, and that was often what was designated for them. But we've seen women go into talk show hosting, we've seen women become political journalists, being at the forefront. You've got someone like Sophie Mokoena, who is very formidable, as an international reporter, as a political reporter, as the head of the international desk at the SABC. We're also seeing Mabi Mhlangu, who started at SABC, SAFM radio, and now she's back in the media space. She used to be managing editor at ENCA, and now she's at Newsroom Africa. We see women like Katie Katipodis, who has started newsrooms up from scratch, including Newsroom Africa. She is now working at Kaya FM. So within the 30 years, in terms of shattering what we call the glass ceiling, and I think Prof. Has made reference to that, we're seeing that women are getting into the operational space and a little bit into the managerial space. But we need to think about ownership and control of media in terms of women ownership and women control. And I think that is the challenge that is facing you guys, and your peers in the next 30 years. So what I'm saying is that we have a lot to celebrate as women in the sector. There are challenges. Last year we were here talking about the cyberbullying of female journalists. So issues of harassment, issues of what is called facilitated technological gender-based violence as well. It's happening a lot to women in the media sector. So those are the challenges that we really have to think about, and how we can create laws and how we can create policies to change that. And I want to just highlight Carol's role, because Carol is a board member at the Media Development Diversity Agency. There is a strong move for women to get onto boards, because that is where decisions are being made. Media companies have boards. Women are not playing in that space. The CEOs, women are not playing in that space. So these are some of the things we have to think about in the 30 years while we celebrate the strides that have been made. We have women editors across the board, print, broadcast. We're seeing SANEF has a second female chair as well. The South African National Editors Forum has a female chair as well. And I think all of this has been enabled by the policies that government has put into place. Our responsibility, people like myself, people like Melissa, who work in this policy-making space, is to ensure that those policies work and they work for women, for men, for practitioners within the media space. And I think highlighting again on challenges, we have disinformation, misinformation, that we have to really, really focus and concentrate on. I'm sure the profs, it's one of your challenges when you're doing your curriculum review. How do you insert this and actually sensitize young people that are going into the sector not to play in the dark web, and to actually still uphold those principles of journalism, the principles of the information ecosystem, around ethics. So I'm just concluding to say that within 30 years, a lot has been done. There is support through the MDDA for those of you who would want to start up your own small commercial print, get together, do a community radio station. The support is there. You've got the NYDA, you've got preferential procurement policies that are also allowing for women to participate in any sector. So I just want to say the ocean is deep and the ocean is wide for all of you. And within this 30 years, let's take stock of the good, but let's also be up and ready for the challenges that we've noted thus far. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tsegofatso. You touched on something I'm going to say very important, when you started going into the misinformation and disinformation, I think, which is a very huge issue in our space. Especially with the invent of the social media environment and really the sharing of information, and we got into deep fake, and we got into quite a whole lot of things. And it gets very difficult to manage information and content in that space. I mean, we saw with the elections and what was happening there, you know, at the CSIR, I don't know if you recall, we already had a disinformation, misinformation webinar that we partnered with some institutions of higher learning for, because it became such a critical thing. And I think when the CSIR was also doing its elections prediction tool, it came along with the misinformation. By the way, when there was that elections prediction tool, people kept asking CSIR to predict when they would get married, or if they would win the lotto. So it veered very left very quickly. But you're touching on something very important, which I think that we need to really, as communicators, and all of us, because journalists are communicators, even though as communicators we're not necessarily journalists, and we need to understand that bigger space. We form our own internal journalism within our corporates. But as we engage with that, I think that's the one area, but you touched on also something else around the management and not just operations, where communicators were female or women communicators were more your runners on the ground and not really the guys moving up into the higher echelons. And I was having a conversations with the panelists earlier. I was saying, you know, when I started out as a spokesperson, I've worked in probably 6 different SOEs at this point. I'm not going to tell you how long it's been that I've been in this environment. I must hide my age. But one hardly saw women in front of the cameras. Most of the times let me not mention their names, they'll call me and ask why I mentioned their names, but a lot of the time, whether it was in government communicators and SOE, even with some of your reporters, you had a lot of strong male presence. What I want to understand, does GCIS actually play a role in actually turning this tide, where we're actually investing in pushing the women and really grooming them and growing them into those spaces? I'd really want to throw that at you. Public sector communication as well as the media communication, what role do you play in assisting women get into those management and leadership positions?
Thanks for that reflection, Melissa. I think one of the reasons we came to Tshwane University of Technology 3 years ago and said, this is something that we would like to do, it's because we started a partnership with the GIZ, and they were doing something around really looking at, you know, representation of women in the newsroom and in the media. And they had done a study, and there's a campaign we're working with them on. It's called Step It Up for Gender Equality in the media sector. And I think this partnership said to us, we need to do change management from the grassroots level. And who can be our best partner? And we felt that TUT could be our best partner. And we started this conversation because we used to have this conversation amongst ourselves at the GCIS with very senior, women in the sector. But we realized that those women have already arrived. How do you actually change? You change from the bottom. You strengthen those that will come into the space, because then they will be able to say, oh, but I remember I was at this event and I remember this is what was said. I think I want to position myself in this way. And I think that is our contribution to really changing things from the grassroots level. Majority of our internship intake is female. And I think you even see majority of the students here are female. So we tend to also incubate a lot of young women into the space. And I think also through the MDDA, there is now a concerted effort to look at women-owned enterprises and women-owned projects. So we are moving in that direction. And I think for people who are in the communication space, We are obviously assisted by the provisions that are there in terms of employment equity. So you do see the tide changing. You do see female heads of communications or female spokespersons coming through because of the provisions that have been made within the 30 years to say that, we need to have employment equity. How many women are there? But how many women that are diverse, racially as well, And I think those provisions, we are seeing the fruits of those provisions. People like you, myself, my colleague, Peliswa, we're sitting here because of those kind of provisions. But I think there's still more that we can do. And I think even with this partnership, what we've also tried to do is to say, let's not end at an event. Let's have some kind of impact project. So when the outgoing first female government spokesperson, Pumla Williams, was outgoing, we took some of the 10 students to really have a sit down with her so that they can connect and they can have this inspirational, connection with someone, of her caliber. And also, again, we'll be doing something on the 28th. This time we're bringing in women from across the marketing, advertising, communication sector to mentor some of the students. And we're hoping that that mentorship and that partnership will last long. So it's our contribution, but we do believe that the sector at large can actually collaborate and have more contribution in that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, Mtsego. So you actually touched on the MDDA. Maybe Carol, and I think this would be an opportune moment for us probably to hear from you around the 30 years, yes, of community media. And as the MDDA, maybe you can kick us off with who is the MDDA and what do you guys do? And then maybe take us through a very short journey of about 5-minute journey on the 30 years of community media. What has been happening in that space? And even maybe touch on the value of community media. So Carol, if you can just give us a bit of that.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Let's maybe first start with the 30 years of community media, because MDDA is just 20 years. So we'll dwell into the 20 years of MDDA after speaking about the role that community media has played in the South African democracy. I think community media is one of the benefactors of democracy because before 1994, there was no community media. So you couldn't rally together as a community and say we want to start our own station where we can tell our own stories, where we can reflect on our own journey as this particular community. So came 1994 and that media landscape was then opened up. And we saw the birth of the likes of Josie FM. We saw the birth of the likes of Soweto TV. We saw even in Ekurhuleni the birth of the likes of Kasi FM. Those have been critical stations that have come up, and one of the key and biggest things about community media is the opportunities they give to young people. They are one of the more accessible kind of media where as a graduate, you can easily walk into a community media station and say, I'd like to volunteer. I'd like to start up my career right here. I'd like to use my skill and tell the stories of my people in this particular station. So we've seen community media being a great stepping stone for young professionals who have just entered the sector. So it also has become, over the years, one of the key groundbreaking media. So most of the stories you'll see in mainstream have actually most likely started in community. For example, the Thabo Bester story, it was broken by a female in Ground Up, which is a community media, online publication. It's not mainstream, and we've seen community media giving critical opportunities to young females to come up and build up their careers. We know one of the producers for Make G, Podcast and Chill, one of the people behind the birth of Make G podcast, is a young lady from Kasi FM. So she's from Katlehong. She was there doing, being a journalist, breaking stories, moved from being a journalist to a producer, and then got that opportunity to work with Make G. So community media has played a significant role, especially for females as well. It has become like a protected space where young females could come and start off their careers. Let's then go to MTDA. The Media Diversity and Development Agency was started about 20 years ago. It is one of the things that before I became a board member, I worked a lot with the MTDA as director for the Association of Independent Publishers, where it was a group of over 200 newspapers that are locally based. They had formed their own association and had collaborated with MTDA. So MTDA does two things. In fact, more than two things, but because I've got 5 minutes, I'll focus on the two. So they provide grant funding. So if you were to decide that you want to actually start your own publication, you could then go through the process of applying for a grant. They also do another thing where they do training. So they don't just give people money and say, go do your best, let's see how far you can go. They provide really necessary training to upskill community media so that they become competitive. They also, in their grant funding, what they've done for community radio, they've tried to put them at a competitive level. So they provide really upmarket studio equipment. So we're not going to give you old equipment that was used 10 years ago. We do understand that with the type of, how fast the media industry moves, we also need to pick up, to continue to match the skill of mainstream. So that we give out upmarket community radio equipment. We could use our equipment to do live streaming. You could use our equipment to actually do outside broadcasts. So we make sure that the type of support we provide to community media at least assists them as far as we could to make sure that they're at the same level as mainstream media. I know that we have now started providing some funding and support for community radio, for student radio. So I know I need to be corrected, but yes, TUT is in line of getting that support from the MTDA. The reason why we are doing that is to actually support the initiatives by GCIS to start from the ground, going up. We understand the importance of having a radio station as students, of having newspapers as students, because that is where we should be actually supporting you guys from that level. So as we are also quite deliberate in terms of support that we give to female-owned enterprises. We do make sure that we do cover that. We do actually promote female-owned enterprises in the media space. And we are also quite deliberate in ensuring that when we provide trainings and when we provide necessary skills in the sector, we do focus on women. And we've achieved a lot. We've funded over 1,000 community radio stations. We also realize the challenges that print is having, and we are quite deliberate in assisting print. We understand that we are moving towards an online platform, and we are now looking into supporting things like podcasts, looking to supporting things like online publications that are coming up, because we do understand that this sector changes quite quickly. I'll end it there.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Carol. I took quite a lot of notes there, especially with the support you guys provide. And I think it's important, ladies, that we actually note some of these things, because this is the type of information you're going to need if you want to start your own community radio or proceed within that space. Now, I do have a question for you, Carol. So what we're going to do is I will ask a question, maybe also some commentary from some of the panelists, and then even yourselves, any questions or comments towards our first three speakers, and then they will be able to respond to those. Before I kick that off, Carol, I think I'd mentioned to you, so around 2022, I think it was, I was facilitating a workshop for a workshop for road shows with community radio stations, where we were going around the country, 9 provinces. It was led by Centec, partnerships with MDDA, ICASA, GCIS, DCDT, NCRF. Oh, sorry, these are all acronyms. I do apologize. You've met MDDA. ICASA is the regulator, is the independent communications regulator that we have in South Africa. We've got the GCIS, you do know. DCDT is the Department of Communication and Digital Technologies. NCRF is the National Community Radio Forum. So there were a whole lot of stakeholders we were trying to workshop with community radios. But there were common threads there that we could pick up, like finance, management, governance, which were issues in the community radio space. However, without fail, the issue of finance and financial resources was a huge issue. And we started talking about the funding model into this. And what happens is with community radio, there were a lot of skills lost because they don't pay as much as your, I'm going to say, commercial and mainstream. Now, community radio is critical for communities. Finance is also important. So how are we looking, I think, as a whole to address this finance situation? And it's important for you guys, because whether you're starting your own community radio or you run your own media company, finance has become critical. Because sometimes as communicators, we say we're language people. But if you don't understand the finances, someone is going to get into your finances. So you need to understand that space. And I think it's important for you to know that. So how are we looking at the financial modeling around community radios and the funding model for those? And probably not just Carol. Maybe let me pose this to our entire panel. Maybe some of those challenges you can reflect on, especially the financial ones. But what are the solutions we can look at in ensuring that community radio remains sustainable?
Let me take the first step, then other panelists will then come through. That is one of the saddest things in terms of community media. There is, I think the key story we could tell is Bush Radio, one of the oldest community radio stations that actually got shut down because it had financial issues. As MDDA, we are quite cautious of such, and we try help as much as we can. But here's where the challenge is. We do not have enough money to help everyone. So that's why we've got a grant cycle that once a year we'll have people that will apply. And if we had all of the money, we'll give everyone that had applied that meets the minimum requirements that funding. But unfortunately, because we are operating from a limited pot, one of the things that we've been crying about as the MDDA is lack of financial support from our government. We get less than 4% of our money as MDDA actually comes from Treasury. And then certain portions of it then comes from the taxes that NBA actually provides. There is an untapped fund that we've been in conversations to say there is that universal transversal fee fund where all of these people that are paying monies to Centec, there is that particular fund that we've been asking that give us just a little bit so that we could assist these community radio stations. One of the biggest challenges community radio stations face is the Centec fees. Yes, it's financial management contributes, but we have tried to, as MTDA, upskill them in that. Every year, we make sure that there is a financial cost that these that community radio station managers actually attend, so that they get better understanding on how to handle their finances. But majority of the time, when community media comes knocking at our door, it's not necessarily that we had this money, we failed to actually manage it. It's to say, we've managed to raise this amount of money from advertising. Yes, I'll get to the advertising TCS. You still owe us our 30%. So we received this portion of money that we raised through advertising, sponsorships, and donations. But it's not enough for us to actually pay Centec. And at some point, Centec fees are a bit much. You'll find a station owing, we've got Radio Veritas that was owing Centec 600,000. And we asked them, how did you get to that much? And they're like, we kept on paying them, but because we don't make enough, this debt keeps on growing and growing and growing. And we need to find a particular way. It has even resulted to some stations saying, we actually don't want Centec anymore. We'll self-transmit. We've got stations that are now opting to self-transmit. It has its benefits, but it also has its limitations. So, and also because Centec has so much infrastructure, we don't want that infrastructure lost by encouraging people to self-transmit. It's important that we stay in the same boat and we use this particular infrastructure, because even the quality of self-transmission is questionable. So we've got that issue and that challenge in community radio in terms of how finances are managed. The second issue is the issue of advertising.
Sorry, before you go on to the issue of advertising, because you've raised something very important. And unfortunately, Centec is not here to either defend themselves or to say these are some of the issues. And the reason I'm interjecting on that one, we're going to get to the advertising because I do want to deal with that. And because I was, luckily enough, part of those engagements on those roadshows, and one of the questions that got asked was, then how is Centec supposed to pay its supplier if the customer is not paying it? And just to quickly explain, within that radio space, there's the transmission that is provided by the mentioned company, but also it comes in different ways. So with the towers or the high towers, what happens is there's a satellite in space, and maybe let me speak about it in layman's terms, that gets rented. So there's a company that has put out a satellite out in space, out in orbit outside of Earth, that then the transmission or distribution company then has to pay rent to. And then they then also charge whoever's there. So my question that or rather my comment then maybe or question becomes that when you look at the bigger environment and space, everyone has to pay everyone. So you're talking about self-provisioning, which you're saying has quality issues. But in order to get the good quality, you now have to pay a bit more. But considering that that company also has to pay its people. So how do we resolve that? Because for me, when we keep passing the buck, it's going to be problematic. The issue is, how do all the players come together and say, guys, this is what's feasible and this is what's not? And not in defense of the signal distributor, but what I'm saying is that signal comes at a cost. So the satellite in space comes at a cost. So everyone has to now pay for that cost. So are we saying that community radios then do not have the capabilities to pay for that cost? And the question becomes, who then should bear the burden of that cost? Because it's either the signal distributor then also becomes unsustainable or shuts down, or the community radios becoming unsustainable and shut down. Should community radios be using that signal distributor, or should they self-provision? If they self-provision, do they have the capabilities to maintain that self-provision? And if not, then they have to go back to the signal distributor to assist them. And that is where we keep finding ourselves in the cycle. And that's what I'm trying to avoid, that we've had these workshops and these engagements with all of these parties, but we're still back at this. Now, there was also the journey, and I don't want to get that off the Pan-African satellite, for instance, that, you know what, because we're paying costs there, maybe South Africa should launch its own satellite. So these are all conversations that come into play, that colleagues, at this point, everyone is paying someone. And everyone, so how does community radio, if they want to stay with the state-owned signal distributor, then raise its funds? But if you're saying the signal distributor must reduce its costs, how then do they pay their supplier who has to be paid in dollars? And it's a vicious cycle. And that's the conversation I want to have, that there are community radios outside of South Africa. You've got community radios in other countries. What is their funding model, and how are they remaining sustainable? And how are we then ensuring that we also assist our community radios remaining sustainable? I still think that we need to really look at that as a group effort. I don't want us to point and say this one and that one, but how do we make sure everyone in the value chain remains sustainable?
I was getting to the solution.
Great.
I was getting to the solution. You're quite right. That's why, as MTTA, we are always of the view that Centec needs to be paid, to a point that when we have raised enough funds at some point, we do end up contributing to Centec fees. So, but the solution here is to make sure that community radio remains sustainable. How do we do that? Funding is not the only solution to actually making sure that a station is sustainable. The biggest thing is we all need to agree that community radio stations are important. There has been a promise and a talk for years of the 30% of government advertising being taken to community radio. So the biggest shortfall that community radio faces is lack of advertising. So they will get advertising from Carol, who runs a spaza shop there, to say, tell the Magogos that on pension day, I'm running a special on hampers. They will get those small ones, but they do need bigger and substantial advertising to come through. We've seen the likes of Josie FM that is showing KFM flames these days, where if a community radio station is assisted properly, it is able to actually be independent. Josie FM is at a point where it has received MTTA funding a while back, but they are sustainable to a point where they owe Centec zero. They are doing well, and we've seen from their model that with great advertising, these people are then able to be sustainable. We've asked Josie FM, give us, you don't have to name your advertisers, just a blank overview of where you are getting your advertising. And majority of their advertising actually comes from government. So the question is, if government can give so much advertising to Josie FM, what is stopping government from supporting other community radio stations? Then we get into that point of, okay, we've also seen corporate as well. So then we've seen that it's not only government's fault that they are not funding other community radio stations. There is a problem in terms of how other community radio stations actually position and present themselves. And we are then now as MTTA working into how we assist them. You know, branding is quite important for government. It's important that even for corporate advertising. So there is a lack of skills in that space where community radio stations, because they are sometimes so centrally community managed, there's lack of expertise into how they brand themselves, how they package their products, and we are working with them to actually get them to that level where they remain sustainable on their own, where we've also started a course of assisting them on doing a simple thing as a rate cut, where a media buyer will call for a rate cut, but there's no rate cut. But we are working with them, and we feel that it's an effort of all of us together. MTTA can come in and assist in terms of those skills and training, but corporates and government as well needs to be encouraged into saying, consider your community media.
Thank you very much. And I think we delved very deep, but I would really love, because you brought something very important right again. I'm always saying that I have to take responsibility for myself in an environment in which I exist and operate. And I have to strategize how I'm going to go forward. So now you're talking about, so how do we get that funding or that money or that income in order for us to be functional? You mentioned the 30%. And this 30% has been in talks for a very long time. So maybe Tseho and even Nico, because you came from the community broadcasting space, where are we, maybe Tseho, around this 30%? And how are we going to be able to implement it, especially because you've got your government department, but you've also got your state-owned entities. State-owned entities run their budgets, and government departments run their budgets. Where are we with ensuring that we actually assist and support? But keeping in mind that target market and target audience is always at the back of mind of any corporate and any entity that has to be sustainable. So how do do you position this? And maybe before we get there, Nico, maybe a bit of your experience around this funding situation, even if it's just for 20 or 30 seconds.
Okay, cool, perfect. Can you hear me? All right, great. Good morning. So just to quickly answer your question around funding, I'll introduce myself and everything slightly later on. With regards to like the technicalities of just how much is poured into community media, I think that I won't necessarily delve into, but I think there really is quite a lack of funding and a lack of resources that comes into community media. And I think what that does is it really inhibits the journalists or the news editors' ability to really, go the extra mile. So I would really love to hear what has to be said with regards to the technicalities of that 30%, because when you're on community media, some of the things that you do find, which can be challenges, is resources. So your cameras, your mics, your cameramen, your cars to go to stories. And that has really also played a part in my journey with running a newsroom.
Thank you. So I suppose I get the tough questions. I think, panelist Melissa, the 30% yes is spoken about. But I think what we have to appreciate is that anything that is what I will call a provision has to be legislated. Because for you to enforce something, it has to be legislated. And I think, unfortunately, in the process of the 30%, there wasn't a move to ensure that it is legislated, so that there is compliance, monitoring, and evaluation of it. But currently, the MDDA Act is being reviewed, and I think these are some of the things that are being considered on when we review the funding model for community radio. Do we need to then ensure that we legislate per percentage, the funding that will go in there? Do we also legislate according to designated groups? Do we say 5% of funding, as an example, 5% of funding should go to women-owned enterprises? And this is going to be a public participation process. And I think it's important that we then ensure that as we do public consultations on the review, we then say, we want the 30%, for example, as a sector. We want the 5% as a sector. So I'm saying that there's an opportune time now with the review to ensure that all the good ideas that were never legislated can be legislated. I think that is what has to happen. But going back to what Carol said about the type of facilities that are now being refurbished within the radio stations that were initially funded. Currently, there are production studios as well as broadcast studios. So what the production studios are giving some of, the young people in our audience an opportunity, they can actually now walk into their community radio station and ask to use the production facilities to record their podcasts, to record the voiceovers if they're voiceover artists. So opportunities are opening up in the production sector within the community radio. And I think it's efforts that will happen between various government departments to ensure that young people in particular can utilize those production studios, but that could also be part of a sustainability model. So it's work in progress, but I think the review of the legislation is an opportunity for all of us to say, we want 30%, we want 5%, and it is legislated so that we are all fully held accountable for it.
Thank you very much for that. Are there any questions maybe and comments from the audience or contributions around community radio and what's happening in space? Okay, we've got a hand over there, so that's one. Are there any other hands? That's two. So one is the lady with the lanyard, the red lanyard. And then two, where was two again? Okay, I see you right in front of the cameras. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. I have a... Okay, I hear...
Sorry, please introduce yourself
I'm
as
sorry.
well and where you're from.
I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
I'm Koketo Makwane. I work at the university, but I'm studying my BA degree in communication science with UNISA. Okay, so I hear a lot of focus is mainly on radio stations. I think my question is more so on what kind of strategies are there for, say, the MDDA that fosters new and creative strategies in terms of media, because a lot of young people are going into not just radio but also things like vlogging and those transformations in the media space. So how does the MDDA also foster and groom and bring in these young people that are coming up with these new and creative ideas in terms of getting into the media space? And also another question is unemployment is it's at such a high rate. So because we hear a lot about funding small, radio stations and so forth and so on, is that where we look at in terms of eradicating unemployment, especially in the communications and media space? Because we are in a learning environment, and I think a lot of young students are worried about, when I graduate, am I going to be able to find a job, or do I need to get into entrepreneurship in order for me to get somewhere with my career? So yeah, those are my questions. I was clear.
Okay, let's take the second and last question, and then we'll take responses from the panel. It's the lady over there. Thank you.
Good morning to everyone. My name is Dimpho Khalani, and I'm a second-year journalism student. So this is more of a comment and a question, or request rather, to Ms. Carol Musala, right? So I've worked at a radio station, community radio station, volunteered. And I've seen the work you guys do with the community radio stations. It's 2 radio stations so far. And then my question, rather request, is that I've seen how the impact of lack of financial support in radio stations is. You get that sometimes people don't get paid. They volunteering and things like that. Sometimes you find people who live far. They have to come for shows and things like that. Sometimes they don't even have money to go to work, and which results in the radio, or the show rather, being bad the whole time. So I just wanted to request that, can we really work on such things, the funding, so that people can earn something at least? Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. So I'm gonna request then we deal, the first questions around the strategies around new media by the MDDA and really how to foster that space, and then using community radio with unemployment being high, using community radio to assist in eradicating the unemployment rate. So I'll leave that to, in fact, the entire panel to contribute. You thought you got the difficult questions. Let's first start with the issue of new media, the alternative. As MTTA, we are always looking at such. I think earlier this year, we funded our first owned black billboard here in Soshanguve. So we had a group of young guys that said, we actually want to start owning the billboards. And that's not conventional media, but it's still in the media space. So we funded them into actually putting up their own billboard just outside Sosh Mall, if I'm not wrong. Yeah. So we are looking at such, and we are also, remember, we are also constrained by legislation. So there is only a particular, according to the MTDA Act, there's only as far as we can go. So we are looking, like it's already been said, that the new act is a new opportunity. So we have been debating amongst ourselves as a board whether to actually start funding podcasts. And the biggest challenge that we have is we cannot fund things that are in unregulated space. So remember, with print, they've got the press council.
So we know that once we give you funding, you will subscribe to the Press Council. And we are doing that because we're also a cautious board. We do not want to fund things that there's no control over them using the dark web. You need to be responsible. So in terms of trying to make sure that the media space remains a true reflection of South Africa and reports accurate news, we look at funding in that space. So with podcasts, that's where the challenge is. With also some online media, that's where the challenge is. So the online media that we've funded currently are those that are saying we are a print publication, we subscribe to the Press Council, but we also have an online presence. So we'd like funding to look into our website, we've given funding to that. So with podcasts and some of the new media, that's where the real challenge is. How do we then fund where they've not come together and agreed on a code of conduct? They've not come together and agreed that as a podcast, we are not going to sit in a room and shame and joke over a rape incident. So how do we then, so that's where the discussions that we are having, and that's where the law, our act actually constrains us. So that's where we're at. And then in terms of employment opportunities, we always strive for those. We always encourage the stations that we work with to open up doors to the communities around. But remember, the stations are also facing challenges of money. How do we then make sure that the people that volunteer, the people that come here are given some sort of allowance? But for all the stations that we fund, we do give out a certain portion of the funding that is meant to contribute as a stipend to those that will be working at the station. So if we get funding for MDDA for a year, we'll upgrade your studios, we'll give you certain trainings on managerial and other issues, we'll give you stipend, and even if you need other equipment outside of the station, if you're going to say, actually we think that we are going to need additional screens where we don't want our news anchors to be reading off a printed script. We do make provision for laptops, for screens. We do try to be dynamic. And believe me, if we had the money, if we had enough resources, we'll make sure that each and every community-owned media, whether it's radio, whether it's print, whether it's TV, it's properly taken care of. Because we strongly believe in the role community media plays in South Africa.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Carol. I'm not sure if anyone wants to touch on the unemployment.
Yes, I'd like to, good morning, Zanele Zwane. Sorry I was late. But I'd like to touch on the issue of financing and funding for community radio. I come from the NGO sector, and listening to Carol here talk about the issue of financing for community radio stations and advertising, I felt a bit guilty because we always go to community radio stations with the social responsibility card to say, it's social responsibility, give us a discounted rate, basically. And I'm thinking that also needs to change. And I think there are opportunities because now when we look at programming, basically, we are encouraging collaborative programming. And maybe it's something that in the NGO sector, we also have to learn to say that as opposed to looking at media as a free space that we can tap into or abuse, because it is somewhat abused. We should look at bringing them in when we are designing our programs, bringing them in as an equal partner who will also cost, because that's how we work with other partners. A partner will come in and cost what they will need to push the project. But with the media, we always come in with our rates already put out and saying, oh, as much as possible, we'll negotiate for free space or for a discounted rate. Yet, we say they are key role players in driving social change. So we need to be acknowledge more their role and fairly do so, actually, and treat them more as an equal player and equal partner, where they can also, through that, generate their own resources and funding, and they can be paid for the work that they do. In other instances, for instance, I know at some point with Soul City, what used to happen was if you attached a journalist to a certain project, then you would give them a stipend of sorts, basically, to say, this is, we never called it a salary, a stipend to say, acknowledging your contribution to the project that you are implementing with us. So, yeah, just that would be my contribution
Thank
to the
you.
discussion, yeah.
Thank you, Zanele. I think indirectly there is a response around that unemployment question, because when there's no funding within the community radio, basically they're not able to pay those stipends or those salaries, and therefore people will leave for better pay. I think the finance issue is really what more of the bigger issue that we need to deal with in the community radio environment. And I know now I'm a moderator now responding because my panelists are refusing to answer this question, but it is what it is. The community radio space is an opportunity for us to be able to deal with community unemployment, especially in that place. So it should be a vessel that should be utilized. And what Zanele was saying is what we do. We negotiate with community radios, but we don't negotiate with the big commercial radio stations, or if we do have a hard stop. But because we know that they need that funding, we are abusing the system. So with what's happening with the MDDA Act review, that can also be something then that gets integrated in how the funding around community radios, not just the money that they are sending through, but also the regulation around that space and the ability for us to do those negotiations. Secondly, with the legislation that Seho was talking about around the 30%, that is also, those are also means, but it means that we must strongly stand on that. But lastly, it's an ethical issue. The same way that when I walk into one of the big shops, I nearly gave a name, and I'm willing to buy eggs at a certain price, but with umama ekoneni, I'm going to try and heckle and haggle. You understand what I'm saying? So there's an ethics issue that we also need to deal with, where we talk about the moral decay. So we have to respect a person's craft. So those are some of the elements that we had to deal with. And as an individual, I was thinking about it on my drive here, that when I joined the Institute of Directors, I needed to be untrained and retrained on governance and what ethics, and there's the difference between law and ethics. And as an individual, you also have to make those choices. So there's a lot of facets that speak to that, but addressing the financial issue, and I think also our cultural, ethical issues, we should be able to actually deal with those community radio needs. So I'm going to move, okay, thank you very much, Seko. Have I triggered a thought? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I want to respond to the question around unemployment and opportunities. And when Carol was speaking, I put myself in the shoes of, the audience. And I said, Carol is actually saying, you can be a marketer in the community media space. You can be a fundraiser in the community media space. You can be a web developer in the community media space. You can be a podcast producer like I was thinking about a list of different careers that one could actually develop, because we have sold talent as the one thing that comes first. You must be a newsreader, or you must be a presenter, and that's the only career that we go for. And with all the problems that she's mentioned, who is going to fix those problems? Who's going to fix those governance problems? Who's going to fix the branding problems? Who's going to fix the fundraising problems? So for me, I'm saying she's highlighting opportunities, particularly for our audience sitting here, to say, don't walk into a community media project, whether it's print, whether it's digital, whether it is, a broadcast, and say, I want to be the face, I want to speak, I want to be behind the mic. Go and try and fix all these other smaller governance issues. We've been talking about decision-making, management, and I think now it's the opportunity to really harness and get into management of community radio stations. With your skills, with the education that you're getting here, I think it's a real opportunity to change the landscape. Because if 10 of you heed that and contribute your skills, 10 of you will be station managers at some point, you know, or 10 of you will be CEOs, you know, of big media companies. And I think it's a change mindset, and we need to think differently about how to exploit the entire value chain. Very, very important. Melissa spoke about, I think, and Carol spoke about self-provisioning. Who is supplying these equipment? The small satellites, who's supplying them? Are women in that space of supplying? You know, are women in the space of being technicians? You know, in terms of that self-provision, if there is, the studios themselves refurbishing, supplying of the equipment in studios. So I think we need to shift our mindset and use today's conversation to think about what are the other opportunities, what are the blue oceans in the sector. So I just wanted to really contribute that and say, if there's one thing, let's shift the conversation and look at opportunities. Thanks.
Yeah, and thank you so much for that, Sekho, because what she's saying now, she's throwing it back at you and saying you are the solution. So that unemployment that we're talking about, you're the solution. Even the finances she was talking about, she spoke about advertising, branding, marketing, who's doing it for them. You're going to have to be that solution. So you actually build that. So I really, really love that about what you've said. You know, earlier on, you were talking about, I think it was you, Carol, who was talking about, when we were talking about funding, and someone had raised the new media in the audience, and now how do we govern that space, and how do we regulate also that space? And you mentioned something very critical but so sensitive. You spoke about, you know, getting into your cubicles and laughing at rape incidents and talking about these things nonchalantly, and these are very painful things. So I would like maybe to ask Zanele, Zwane from GIZ, if you can just talk about gender sensitivity. And I think it's something we need to start talking about, gender sensitivity in our reporting, in our conversations, and the role that the media plays in gender equality when we are aware of all this. So Zanele, if you can just open that up for us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Maybe before I start, just to give a bit of insight on the work that we are doing at GIZ and the project that I'm working for.
You're not very audible from my
it?
side. Yeah.
Am I better now? Okay. So basically, just a bit of background. I work for GIZ in a project called the Partnership for Prevention of Gender-Based Violence in Southern Africa. It's a regional program. We call it also known as PFP. It's a regional program working in 5 countries within the SADC region, and South Africa being one of them, to look at primary prevention of gender-based violence. And in South Africa specifically, what we've done work that looks at addressing homophobic bullying in schools. We've done work that looks at promoting sexual reproductive rights of youth in schools as well. And we have done a lot of media work. Lerato already alluded to the Step It Up project, which I'll talk a bit more about. Currently, the work we're doing is looking at scaling up. Based on the success of the homophobic bullying done in schools, we are now scaling up to colleges, where we're working with 5 TVET colleges around addressing homophobic bullying. We are also exploring working with within the mining sector to promote positive masculinity, and as well as work with universities around addressing alcohol use, excessive alcohol use, we call it, and poor mental health as a driver of IPV. So basically, those are some of the things that we're looking at. And then moving on then directly to the issue at hand, what I've been asked to speak on. When we talk about gender-based violence, we're talking about a human rights violation, and in its extremist form, basically. It's a violation that is part of a continuum of gender gender-based discrimination, harassment, and exclusion that deprives women from their ability to thrive and be equal members of society. So basically that means that it limits women's recognition as equal players in society based on their gender, basically. And when we look at that, having said that, let's look at, just recap a bit around what basically the level of GBV in South Africa. We have an NSP, which is a national strategic plan on the response of gender-based violence in the country, which was established in 2020. But despite that, we still are seeing quite high numbers of GBV. If you look at our last police stats, basically it spoke about, it noted that, so this was between July and September last year, we had about 10,500 rapes. We still had 1.5 cases of attempted murder. We still had 14,400 assault cases against females, and we had 881 women who were murdered. So that just gives you a picture of where we are and the magnitude of GBV in our country. That said, we are signatory as South Africa to some of the international statutes, and we are signatory also to the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And when we look at agenda goal, SDG 5, it calls for all countries to make gender equality the foundation of peace in the world. We are signatory to that as South Africa, and which means we need to be contributing towards that. Happy to share that in many instances we have at a global level we have made strides in addressing and contributing to SDG 5. Nonetheless, women and girls continue to suffer from discrimination and violence, and the media. What role are we playing in that? Media coverage for the issue does not reflect the reality and extent of the scourge. So basically it's there, we acknowledge it, we are covering it. There has been a growth in coverage since 2016, thereabout, but still there are many cases, and when we also look at our statistics and our data around GBV in South Africa, we do feel that there's still a lot that is not reported around gender-based violence. There is a lot of underreporting around that. And moving forward, when we look at the issue of the media and the role of the media was first recognized, maybe not first, but highlighted basically in the UN Beijing conference of 1995. And it was noted that the media, I'm quoting now, the media have a great potential to promote and advance the advancement of women and the equality of women and men by portraying women and men as in a non-stereotypical, diverse, and balanced manner. So as the media, that's the responsibility that we have in promoting gender equality. What does that really mean in actual sense? So the role of the media then becomes increasing public awareness on GBV as a human rights violation. It becomes driving social change in public opinion and behavior. It becomes advocating for legal reform and response to GBV. It becomes holding policy makers accountable for the implementation of our NSP, as we have it, and for legal reform. I must say, though, we have seen quite a lot of legal reform in recent years in South Africa, and that is appreciated and applauded. But it must move beyond just being there and instituted to implementation. So we need to hold policymakers accountable in terms of implementation of those policies and laws that we have in place that are so good. How do we do that? Through balanced ethical reporting that is survivor-centered. When we talk about survivor-centered, we mean reporting that causes no harm and is solution-based. We mean reporting that is gender-sensitive. And when we talk about what ethical reporting is, we're talking about reporting that is gender-sensitive and gender transformative. There we are basically saying that be sensitive in your reporting, be sensitive to gender inequalities and portray women and men fairly. We are talking about addressing structural barriers like unequal roles and rights, like and empowering women or victims of gender-based violence, as well as calling for change in the systems and in the services, in law and policy, as well as in the norms, in our social norms, basically, that perpetrate and legitimize gender-based violence. So that is what we are looking at when we talk about responsible, the role of the media and ethical reporting around gender-based violence for gender equality. That then brings me to what we as GIZ have done in an attempt to try and support the media to come to that level of basically to enhance ethical reporting when it comes to issues of gender-based violence. Lerato already alluded to Step It Up and the work that has been done. Step It Up is basically an initiative that was started by our project Partnership for Prevention in collaboration with UN Women, and with the aim to achieve behavior change within the media and creative industries, to create more gender-sensitive, unstereotyped, equal and positive change-driven content, as well as creating safe and equal production environment behind the scenes. So basically that takes us back to the role of the media and ethical, responsible reporting, basically. How did we do this? We had different components to the project, basically. There were multi-stakeholder partners and ownership. Basically, we partnered with different stakeholders. We actually established an advisory team that consisted of different partners within the media sector that came together, that became key in terms of driving and giving guidance in the rollout of the project and in supporting the different media institutions that partnered with us in terms of driving the change and facilitating the dialogues and discussions around that. Another component was that the project was evidence-based. Evidence-based in the sense that we did a lot of research. Lerato alluded to one of the studies that was done. We did research basically that looked at, we worked with Gender Links to do a study, a media monitoring study on current dynamics of gender representation, stereotyping, and the portrayal of gender-based violence in South African television. Another basically also looked at women, where we found that, I won't go into it because I think she already spoke in a bit of detail around some of the findings of that, basically. And we also did a study that also looked at, beyond that, we looked at basically the quality of reporting in some of the different media in the country. And it actually did indicate that there's still a lot of sensationalization. There's still a lot of secondary victimization of victims of gender-based violence. And there's still a lot of basically reporting does not go deep enough to look at solutions, to also look at policy and basically beyond just saying Zanele was raped, and then what? What else should go into that, and balancing of those stories, basically. So, and then we had a platform, the project also created a platform for self-reflection and dialogue, because this research also did say, what does this mean for media houses, basically? What does it mean for media practitioners? And we brought in different players within the media space to engage with that and dialogue around that. And that resulted in the formation of a call to action that was, we called it a statement of commitment, where different media houses and journalists were actually committing to be more ethical in their reporting, to be more sensitive in their reporting, as well as, because this was not just journalists in the newsroom, but it was also people in the entertainment industry, in the media entertainment industry, also looking at pushing stories that are non-stereotypical, that also empower women, basically. So those were the commitments that were made that came out of that call to action. And there was also a lot of capacity building that went into that. With the capacity building, we actually had trainings, trainings for news media, looking at TV, radio, and government communications, GCIS. We had some participants from within the GCIS. We had trainings within the entertainment media, looking at TV, broadcasting and production. We had trainings also for radio, private, public, and community radio, basically on the topical issues that I have talked about, looking at how do we enhance, how do journalists first introspect and address the biases and stereotypes that then influence the quality of reporting that comes out basically at the end, and the quality of their work.
Sorry, Zanele?
Hi.
Yeah, time?
Okay, so quickly, so basically that was what Step It Up was. And from that, we then had recommendations that informed a new phase of Step It Up that we are now looking at implementing. We're exploring partnerships to implement a new phase of Step It Up that looks into basically institutionalizing the Step It Up training into colleges, media studies, and into HR policies and systems of onboarding, basically for media houses, looking at safeguarding women journalists online, because it also came out that women journalists are victims of online abuse, as well as looking at enhancing media reporting through, we're also exploring that through the establishment of maybe a digital media portal, referencing portal, where journalists can go and find factual information that they can reference, and guidelines, and more information basically that they can use to enhance their stories. So yeah,
okay.
In a nutshell, that is it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Zanele, for that. Yeah, let's give her a round of applause. We also have online, I think it would be important to also maybe get a bit of input. Lerato, you are online. She's our SABC senior reporter. And because we're actually talking about what's happening in the journalist space, is Lerato online? Maybe, Lerato, if you can actually assist us, because Zanele spoke about female journalists being bullied online, and I think that outside of some of these elements, maybe you can also touch on some of the work that, as journalists, as reporters, how are you doing that work towards sensitive reporting, but and also we're
actually talking about what's happening in the journalist space. Is Lerato online?
Yes, I am. I don't know if you guys can hear me. Morning.
Maybe, Rato, if you can actually assist us, because Zanele spoke about female journalists being bullied online. And I think that outside of some of these elements. Maybe you can also touch on some of the work that, as journalists, as reporters, how are you doing that work towards sensitive reporting? And also, I should talk.
There's a delay, so if you can proceed, I won't finish the rest of the question, so you can proceed. Thank you, Lerato.
I must just say that as a female journalist, I have not at all, in my career of about 10 years, experienced any form of bullying, whether it's from the story that I've done. I haven't seen any sexism. Okay, so I don't know if you guys can hear me right clear.
I think we're experiencing a delay there between ourselves and Lerato. So maybe let's proceed. Otherwise, it's gonna give us a bit of issues. Yeah, no, she is clear, but it takes a while, it seems, for her to receive the message, because I heard it run an entire monologue there for a moment. I think maybe let's come back to the floor, and then we'll come back to Lerato. The guys at the back, I'm not sure what's going on, but there seems to be some kind of delay happening there.
Between ourselves and Lerato. So maybe
maybe you can mute that for us as well.
It's gonna give us a bit of issues. Yeah, no, she is here, but it takes a while, it seems, for.
What we're going to do is go into a quick quiz with everyone on the floor. Remember, I spoke about a quiz earlier. So maybe let's get into that, because you guys look tired. So we'll go back to one of the first questions. So I'll do probably 2, 3. We'll see how far we get. Quick quizzes. Editor of The Guardian that was mentioned earlier. Who remembers the name? That was the first hand that shot up. Thank you very much. Right over there, the lady with the braids, you who answered yes. I think they want you to speak into the mic so that everyone can hear you. Okay, she did respond though. She responded.
Hello.
Okay.
Oh, my name is Tatamashishi from the Department of Integrated Communications and Journalism. The answer is Ruth first.
Thank you very much. Your prize should be zipping towards you at some point during this conversation. Second question that I'm going to ask. What are the 2 things that were mentioned by Carol? How MD... Oh, that hand is already... The hand's already up. That hand was up already. I'm not even done. Okay, maybe let me let you respond before I finish. Okay, so what are the 2 things that were mentioned by Carol around how they support community radios? Mention maybe 2 of those. So, no, but that hand shot up very fast. Yes, the lady in the white.
Hi, my name is Nole Tandoki. I'm from the Journalism and Integrated Communications Department. The 2 things is, number 1, they provide grant funding to start your own enterprise. And the second one is they provide upmarket student equipment for live streaming and broadcasting. And they also provide training to upskill community media to assist them to be to be on the same level as the stream media. Thank
She
you.
answered 3. Okay. Thank you. Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. Maybe let's move back to Lerato. So what we're going to do, thank you very much for the quiz. So what we'll be doing now, before we actually move to Lerato, this issue of gender sensitivity, I just wanted us to lighten the room for a bit. The issue around the gender sensitive reporting, I think, is a very sensitive issue, and not just around the reporting, but gender equality issues in media houses, in the workplace. And these are critical issues. And I think we'd be failing the audience if we didn't touch base around some of the things that you would have to deal with. I know Lerato has indicated she hadn't experienced any of those. But as we look at communicators and journalists, we travel a lot. We find ourselves in spaces that are not always safe. And sometimes we're not even aware that the spaces are not safe. So how do we actually deal with that, and how do we guard against that? And do we even know where and how to report situations if maybe your boss or even your CEO, who may be your boss's 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 boss? How do you handle these things, and how do you feel safe in handling some of those situations? So I would like to open this to our panels on the floor. If you guys can indicate with a show of hands who would like to assist us in the process of dealing with either sexual harassment in the workplace or when you're away from home traveling, how and who should you contact when you experience this? Are there any takers on our panel? Thank you, Tseho.
I think issues of gender-based violence as well as sexual harassment have really come to the fore in the last couple of years. And I think now young women, young men who will find themselves in those situations can now name and call it for what it is. And I think it's important for one to be aware of when you're in a space, what is it that you are experiencing? So let's say, for example, it's within the workplace. There should be a policy that guides on how you will report gender-based violence and sexual harassment. And I'm going to assume that even at the university, there is guidelines guiding students on how and when to report that as well. So just because you're moving from your tertiary space into a workspace, things do not change. You still go in and find out what is the policy or what is the guideline around reporting, gender-based violence or sexual harassment. And often in the workspace, they could be gender champions, or they could be women's desks or a unit that handles these particular issues. But also, fortunately, in most workspaces, there's something called employee wellness. And I think at the university space, it's equivalent to some facility within the student center where they provide counseling, etc. And those services can be used, and then you can be assisted. But there's also the gender-based violence command center and toll-free line that can be used by anyone experiencing gender-based violence or sexual harassment. And I think Zanele has spoken about legal reform that has happened in the country. So for now, I know that, for example, you can apply for a protection order online, and there are just reforms that are coming in to make it easier. We've got sexual offences courts as well that will specialize in handling cases of sexual harassment and gender-based violence. But we also know that this scourge is a social behavior change issue. So it's a very complex issue as well. We find that people will report, they will withdraw cases because it is a social behavior a change issue. So I just wanted to also just underscore that so that we don't victimize people that report and withdraw their cases. And we sort of understand that it's a very complex space that a lot of people find themselves in. And Zanele has spoken about intimate partner violence, which I think is even more difficult because this is someone you trust, you respect, that could be your boyfriend, your husband, etc., your manager, who you have, I think Melissa earlier in our casual discussion said, you will look at your manager as a father figure or a mother figure, and when they violate you, you get confused. And people have probably seen you hug your manager, they've seen you laugh with your manager, they've seen you have lunch with your manager, and you doubt if maybe you will be believed. So it is complex in that way, but I think familiarizing yourself when you start with the policies so that when it happens, you can identify it and take recourse and action. So that's my view.
Thank you very much. We've got a question from the floor, so we will be taking those as we wait for the mic. The lady over there, I think what she said is very important. Know the policies, know the contact numbers. Thirdly, do not isolate yourself, because I think that's one of the most critical things and the mistakes we make, where we isolate ourselves and withdraw. You've got to tell someone. It can destroy you. So let's take the question or the comment from the floor. Thank you.
Okay, let's go get again. Just a quick open discussion about especially image. We talk about gender-based violence, and we are talking to young women who are in the 2000 era, and they have a different sense of style. And coming into these media spaces, how can you advise women to, how do we conduct ourselves? Especially because in journalism and communications and media, we are the face of South Africa to the world. So how do you advise that young women in media, how do we conduct ourselves? How do we present ourselves in front of the media, in front of people? Because women are picked on. Women can get raped by just wearing a miniskirt. You know, they are still very misogynistic men who still believe in the fact that she asked for it because of what she was wearing. So my question is that how do you advise young women who are getting into the media space? How do we present ourselves in front of the community? How do we, in front of the world? Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And that's a very tough question. And the reason I'm saying it's tough, colleagues, is because now we're balancing someone's right to be themselves and self-expression and dressing, because our constitution does allow us to have that freedom of expression and how we move around and how we dress, right? Versus your right to safety, because you understand that the high level of violence we face as a country and towards women. So now you're trying to make a decision of, I've got the right to be me, but as much as I carry my right to be me, there's someone out there who might actually attack me. And that's why I'm saying it's a very difficult one, because we're putting it on the woman. But someone else can say it, but it's your safety. So how do you address it? So I'm going to ask the panel to actually deal with that. And I prepped it for you, panelists, so that people, as you're responding, there's an understanding that we're not pushing aside someone's right to that. But also, when you go out into the bush, you've got a right to appreciate nature, but you must know that there'll be snakes on the ground that may attack you. So now you need to balance all of that. So I don't know if the media guys would like to assist maybe with either general presentation of yourself there, and how you guys have made sure that you're able to protect yourselves in how you present yourself in those spaces, whether it's yourself, Nico, and maybe Lerato after that, if she's able to come through.
All right, so I think I'll take this one just to begin with. I do think that it is a very, sensitive topic, and I'm very grateful that we're in spaces like these that have these conversations because they are quite important. I think just to, start off by saying I don't believe in this is what she was wearing, therefore she was asking for it, because I think as she so widely articulated that, it is someone's right to safety, and just because I'm wearing a particular thing, it doesn't necessarily give you the right to my body. But to just answer the question with regards to professionalism and around, how you present yourself within the communication space and the journalism space, I think it is very important to understand that news and current affairs is a very serious thing in our country and just globally. When you're in journalism, you understand that current affairs and news is a very serious thing because you're reporting to South Africa, you're reporting back to your community, and the one thing that is important to note is that image is important, right? So if someone's going to be and I'm going to speak specifically from the TV side of things, right? So if someone is going to be on primetime news and they're either anchoring or they are reporting a story that happened in court, of course you want the person who you're going to look at to be very, pleasing to the eye. And when I say pleasing to the eye, I'm not saying necessarily beautiful, right? But someone who's well put together, someone who's able to speak in whatever language that they're speaking is articulately. So I think one thing that Tseho did say, which was quite important, is just familiarizing yourself with the policies of the particular place. So with Journalism 101, conduct is very important, so just how you present yourself if you are going to be meeting ministers, if you are going to be meeting professors, that you always need to be presentable, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean wearing the latest something, but it really means just being able to put yourself together so that when you do ask a particular question or when you do speak, then you are listened to or you're heard. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much, Nico, for that. Are there any other questions from the floor? There's a hand. Okay, that's one, that's two. So those will be our last two questions that we'll be taking. Okay, thank you.
Is it morning? Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nosipo. I am a journalism student. And what I wanted to ask is, in terms of investigation, what measures are being taken? Because as much as we are protecting women, we don't want women to use that in the wrong extent. You get what I'm saying? So in terms of investigation, how far does it go for someone to really prove that they have been violated, they have been harassed? How do we ensure that they really are, innocent in the whole thing? Because sometimes you find that someone threatened the manager, I'm gonna say you raped me if you don't give me that position and things like that. So how do we then investigate and find out more about it? Thank you.
There was a second hand here. The lady it looks charcoal gray. I'm not wearing my eyes. Thank you very much. Please remember to introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Botelo. I'm from TUT second year, Integrated Communication Department. My question is, I'm referring back to what Ms. Zanella was saying. You spoke a lot about gender-based violence, and we spoke about what the media is doing to help. So now my question is, how can we get the corporate South Africa, the private sector, to help in this problem that we're having? Because we only see them being visible when it's Women's Month and 16 days of activism for such a problem that is always happening. How do we get them to contribute, to help us? It's a daily thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think the first question around how do you investigate the validity of basically of the accusation, and there are two things here. Because it's a media communication element, I think we also need to touch on maybe Lerato on the issue of how do you, number one, investigate the validity of the story when it's reported of that rape story, and then we move into the corporate element, which is more really an HR type of question, but we can see how we can assist and support. We'll also ask the leadership on the floor sitting right here in front to assist us. So let's start with you, Lerato, and take it even from a journalism perspective. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lerato Fikisi, a journalist at the SABC. When it gets to GBV stroke rape incidences that happen and you have to report on them, I think the key thing to every single story is that you've got to become objective. So many of the times, for instance, there'll be a breaking story that maybe a 2-year-old got molested, or a 17-year-old. Like, for instance, if you look back, there was a time where at Rhodes University, there were certain spikes of rape incidences coming out back to back at Rhodes University, and people were asking, are these children really being molested? Is it that perhaps getting drunk and then having sexual intercourses, perhaps even consenting to it? And the question came up as to, as journalists, how then do you tell the story without coming across like you're saying it is rape, without proof of that, or telling the story as it is? And like I said, I think key to any journalist telling a true story is that you've got to be objective. So in terms of investigating or reporting such a story, yes, obviously the huge headline would be that an 18-year-old at Rhodes University did get molested, and then obviously getting their side of the story. And then there obviously someone who's raped was raped by someone, so there is a perpetrator. And you have to obviously get the voice of the perpetrator as well, because you can't just say this 18-year-old was raped and you've got no proof of that. And then you obviously have to trace and see, like at Rhodes University, they actually began to pinpoint students who were actually physically raping them, who actually still were on campus. And then there's investigation that's then done via the university, via the police, that then interviews those that have been allegedly caught perpetrators. But the difficulty with reporting GBV cases is that most of the time, the perpetrators, number one, sometimes are underage. So it's hard then to release their names, or to what happens on social media, name and shame them as journalists, because like I said, you've got to remain objective up until there's proper proof that that person did molest. So the easy thing as a journalist is to say, I know the perpetrator, and then write that on social media, because you're trying to find a relevance and you're trying to break a story and say that, you know what, I know that Spogasa got raped, but I also know this, that they got raped by Usipho, and then I put him and I shame him, and I become the so-called good journalist who actually broke the story. But I think a good journalist is someone, yes, who does report that there is incidences of rape, whether it's at Rhodes or in your community, and tell the story as it is. And then after that, do a follow-up story that says, there is an 18-year-old who was molested, but up until that 18-year-old, if he is an adult, appears in court, you cannot name and shame that 18-year-old. And that at times becomes to the detriment of the perpetrator, or the one that has been raped, because they will say, I know it was him. You know, he did rape me. I know it was my uncle. I know it was my dad. But up until that person has been officially appeared in court, given a date, charged even, you can't really, as a journalist, come out and say they are a rapist or name the person as a rapist. Yes, I see it being done, especially with online media, and also most journalists, like someone was saying, wanting to create sensational journalism. But the ethics of journalism say that you can't really name a perpetrator up until thorough investigation and a charge has been given to that perpetrator. So those are some of the challenges that it does face. And obviously, like I always say, that before you are a journalist, you are a human being, and the human element in you does want to name, because the child most of the time does say that I know who it was, or the adult does say I know who it was. But you cannot, as a journalist, start releasing names up until the proper police investigations have gone, the proper laws when it gets to naming perpetrators has been followed ethically according to law, the police, and also journalism. So that does become a sticky issue sometimes, because some people are just like, why not just name and shame him, because we want him to be arrested, because we know who it is, because the students know who it is on campus. But it really isn't that easy, especially if you're trying to make sure that beyond just creating a sensational story, you are able to tell a true story that someone did get raped, and there is a scourge of gender-based violence on campus or in a specific community. but you've got to make sure that your story is balanced, so that you don't create sensational journalism that just highlights a problem on one day and breaks the story, but 2 or 3 days later the perpetrator is running around because you're not able to do a follow-up and find out, are there more girls that are being molested? Did this boy molest? A proper investigation being done by the police? And I must say that sometimes also the police failure, I think sometimes does also impact our work, in the sense that GBV victims do go to the police and they lay a case, and sometimes it stays there for years. So I think that a lot of work also needs to be done in terms of just the protection of rape victims, and also more work to be done in terms of once they've laid their case, so that the perpetrator is arrested or is charged, because sometimes that can take years. So you report on a story this year, but only 10 years later you find that person was arrested because the police didn't formally charge the person. If they're not formally charged, you can't really announce their name on social media or on any news platform. So the police can definitely do better, because as a journalist, I'm not a police, unfortunately. I'm not the law, unfortunately. All I can do is report on facts. And up until the police has done their part, that's all I can really do. So it does sometimes become challenging. But I think the key to any reporting of any journalist is always to ensure that you're objective, that the natural human side does want to sensationalize, does want to obviously take the side of the one that is alleging that they are victims. You obviously will tell the story. You cannot ignore that this child has been raped. But in your reporting, you've got to make sure that you remain ethical, you remain objective, because that's key to being a journalist. I hope that I answered you guys.
Thank you very much, Lerato. I do want to bring it back to the institution where we are in. So, Prof, and I'm putting you now on the spot, with even your management team that's also here, because we do get accusations, and I think the key question is, how do we run those investigations? Because yes, we have to be very sensitive to the victims, but how do we balance that with maybe even false accusations? So how does the process work here at TUT?
Thank you so much, facilitator. Yes, obviously, we do have some processes within the university that our students and also staff members has to go through. Obviously, there are the securities that they have to go through. There are all other processes that they have to. And what is important also, because of this scourge of gender-based violence, particularly on campuses, it is across all campuses, our South African universities. What we have done in the faculties of humanities, we have established a chair, a research chair, the African Research Chair for Campus and School Public Safety. So the very essence of that chair is to look at things like this, the GBV issues, and how can we protect our campuses. Our chair is based in Soshanguve, where our faculty is, because in the past we saw a rise in GBV incidences, particularly in those campuses. So there was a need for a faculty to look also at ways on how can we assist also in reducing this, and also how do we really create awareness to our students on what to do when things like that happen. So as an institution, there are so many initiatives that are taken in terms of addressing these issues. This flight, it is a very sore subject, something really that no female child has to go through. Because of that, like indicated, we have come up with these projects. There are so many projects within the university that are done in order to address the GBV issue. I hope I answered you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. So I had taken my last two questions, but I see that there is a burning question at the back. So maybe let's take it. I know we're out of time. Let's take it. We started a bit late. There's a question there at the back. So we do have a bit because we had to wait for our audience to fill up.
But let's take that. But I think while we're waiting for that, I think for the people who don't have the gender-based violence hotline, if there is at the institution, maybe we can also look at sharing those contact details that when they do go through something like that, who should they contact and how should they contact that? So I think it would be important that towards the end of the session, if you can share that information as well for those who don't have that information, okay?
Okay, thank you so much. Yes, obviously we do have a GPV desk and Social Nguve. So I think now I'm challenging our students now to say that they are journalism and communication students. They must kind of try to find out ways on how can we create awareness as a faculty, as an institution, about this gender-based violence among our students and also the staff members. So we could do that. We could also, as students, assist. We could assist in this issue. So I am challenging you as students, please come up with ways, come up with plans on how do we create this awareness. You are marketers, we are communicators. What tools, what vehicles can we use to communicate with our people? How do we create awareness? So perhaps I'll ask your HOD, Dr. Mushatoni, to give us that, so that in the next year, when we have this workshop, we have a study with results on how we could do on campus to reduce the issue of GBV through communication and creating awareness. Thank you.
The gauntlet has been thrown. Who would be interested in participating in something like this, in assisting? Okay, so that row, those ladies there, their hands are already shooting up. So you see there's an interest in assisting with the awareness campaign. So you know your HOD, and you guys can gather there and actually give her your contact details and names probably, so that you guys can see how you can start mobilizing that process, because it's very important. We'll take that question at the back.
Okay, thank you. It's not a question as such, it's just a comment from...
Please introduce.
Okay, my name is Kidiboni, the station manager of TUT-FM in Soshanguve campus. From the media point of view, I think at times parents are the ones that are failing, as they don't want to make a better contribution, because you'll find that a victim has been raped and she's been told that you don't tell anyone. When you go to them as the media, you want to speak to her, you'll tell you that they said I should not tell anyone about this. And you want to come as a media, it's our role to expose such things that are happening. And the more you talk about it, even the civil society organization will be able to assist, especially on the issues of counseling and so on. So you'll have to nag until then the victims speak out. So maybe we should also emphasize to say things like that when they happen, let us bring them to light so that the victims are able to get assistance or intervention. Because you'll find that I work with journalism students. Sometimes you find that the person is not performing, it seems like he's got a problem. When you get the person to speak and get one-on-one with the person to want to know what the problem is, she'll tell you that I was raped some years back, so that thing is still in me. Because when you get to cover those kind of stories, it hit back to, you know, those years that she has experienced the very same ordeal. You understand? So I think talking as well, it does help as a victim, like speaking out, so that you are able to even get counseling, not just speaking out, giving the story to the public. Even for your own sake, I think it does help.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sorry to
Okay, Lerato, you wanted to jump in quickly?
Awesome. Sorry, I'm so sorry to interject. I think what the lady just spoke about is so important, and I think is so true. And I think we were speaking before about the role of community radio stations, and I think another fundamental role of community radio stations is just to also inform and educate people on what rape is. There's a case that I'm currently working on in the case of Christopher Panyaluto. Pastor Timothy Omotoso. And what really has stood out in that case is just what the definition of rape is, and how sometimes children don't even know what rape is, because you've got victims or witnesses in that case that say, you know what, for instance, fingers were inserted into my private part, and they didn't know at that time because of a lack of information that is rape or not rape. So I think what the lady was saying now is that there is also a lack of information brought out to community members, whether it is to parents or to kids, to first define what rape is, to define what consent is. Because most children will say, I just had sex, but I didn't want to have sex. And they don't even know that not consenting means that that's actually rape. And they'll just say, no, I just said no, and then he carried on. Then I just kind of just carried on because he made me carry on, not knowing that the moment you said no and he carried on, that actually does constitute as rape. And then also be able to define for themselves and understand exactly what is rape and what is not rape. Because what happens when you get to court, particularly in the case now of reproduced positive of the torso, is that the defense, for instance, is arguing that many of the victims were not raped because rape is not doing A, B, and C. And that goes back to lack of information of what rape is. So you find some of the times the cases against witnesses are dropped because they didn't understand what was happening to them at that time, with the community saying they were raped or they were not raped. So I think also the role of community radio stations, besides just creating a platform for aspiring journalists, aspiring videographers and marketers and PR people, is also to inform and to educate, because they are within the people. They are aware of the challenges that the people in the community are facing, where there's lack of information regarding any topic. And then it becomes their role to educate and inform and ensure that such things of definitions, of clarity, of consent, parents are aware of. And the nice thing is that they also not only are community radio stations in a specific place, but there are people that they know in the community who don't know this information. So outside of just radio presenters, they are sometimes community builders themselves and have an opportunity, because they're now so-called celebrities in their communities, to go back and say, you know what, in my show I spoke of this and this and this, and did you listen to it? And this is what I was speaking about, because they've got that proximity to people in the community. So I think that's another huge role that we mustn't downplay when it gets to community radio stations, about the important role they really have to educate, to inform, and also the advantage they have because of their proximity to some of the challenges that community face that perhaps big broadcasters such as ANC or SABC can't really reach to, because of how the broader scope of news that they have to cover.
And Lerato's hit the nail on the head. Community radio stations are about that community, and therefore the information within that community. But she also said something very important about awareness and knowing what rape is and what rape is not. Guys, coercion, it's rape. If you did not want to do it and someone is coercing you to a point where you have to break down and agree to something, let's just be aware. So please make sure you speak to the people. Issues of sexual grooming, those are things that happen in the workplace as much as they happen to the young people. So if you're being groomed, look at what those definitions are and speak to someone. I think you've got a bigger project on your hands, Madam HOD. There's a whole lot of communication work that needs to be brought to the fore, and awareness of those things. Also preparing young ladies for the corporate environment so that they know what their rights are. Because I think it was Zanele who mentioned that it's also a human right, and talking about what Uzanele had been speaking about, she also mentioned that we are a signatory as a country to a specific SDG. Who remembers what SDG number that was and what it said? There's a hand there. Sustainable Development Goals. She mentioned South Africa as a signatory. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mabati Marakala, and I'm from Tani FM. So if I remember correctly, it has to be 5. And isn't it, it was about gender equality? Yes. So those are the only things that I remember.
That is correct. SDG number 5. So that's a quiz. Thank you very much. And so while we were talking about the community radios and radio stations and broadcasting, whether it's television, radio, whatever, we're talking about the media space. And I think that we've been talking about the impact that radio has on us and the national impact and the work that needs to be done. Look at what we've now given integrated communication. I would like Lerato to actually just come in, even if it's just 5 minutes, Lerato, just to talk to us about community beginnings. Now, this is where we're shifting gears from the more hard-hitting stuff, but really to talk about the stories and the women and the women behind those stories, women like Lerato and Nico, who are in the media environment. Take us back, Lerato, a bit on your community beginnings, the national impact, and basically your journey in the media environment and the lessons you've learned. So if you can just share with the ladies here, and let's get us a bit inspired. Over to you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll keep it short and quick. So I left university in 2004. I left high school in 2004. Then started my media communication and culture degree at Nelson Mandela University. And after I left, after completing my degree, I was just like, it's obvious, I'm going to be the next big thing in TV. At that time, I think the prime television show was Wonang, and she was presenting live. And obviously, she became a representation of what's possible as a Black girl in the TV space. For the first time, we were like, it's possible to become a TV presenter beyond your TV. And I remember just thinking, I'm going to get to Joburg and I'm going to be found by someone and I'm going to become the biggest thing in TV. Big joke. It didn't happen like that. Little did I know that it would take me 8 years and get only to SABC at the age of 28 before I actually started at SABC and the National Broadcaster. So before then, like I said, I didn't get into TV and become the biggest thing in television. If anything, I volunteered for 8 years at various radio stations. So soon after, I realized that I can't go to Johannesburg because I didn't have the experience to become a TV presenter. Number one, I just come out of university. I realized that around me were community radio stations, and perhaps they could help me to grow the talent that I believed I had, because I'd studied, I was good in oral, so I believed I could speak to save my life. And I realized that, okay, perhaps if there is talent here, it must be groomed somewhere before it hits the national screens. So I volunteered at a radio station called Kingfisher. This was probably like 3 or 4 months after finishing varsity, where my parents were just like, you better get a job in corporate and just leave this TV dream because it's not going to work. You've been telling us you're going to be on TV, and now we're on month 5. You're sitting at home without a job, and you should just go to Joburg and try find a corporate. And I was like, I'm not a corporate hand, and I'm not going to go there because I want to be on television, and I'm going to get there no matter how long it takes me. So anyway, I got into Kingfisher FM literally 6 months after sitting at home and just moping and just realizing, okay, let me try and do something. So at Kingfisher FM, I first arrived, and obviously they don't take you and like, okay, you've got a degree, and by virtue of that, you deserve a show at a community radio station. There's equally amount of work that must be done there, and grooming must be done there before you can hit their radio stations as well, no matter how small of a following they have compared to bigger radio stations. So I started off doing some tea. How humbling that was. Someone with a degree had to now do tea for other radio presenters. So I'd sit in on their shows and listen how they present, look how they compile their news, listen how they read their news. And then over some time, I was like, can you just give me a chance to at least read the news? I've been shadowing now for about a month or two. I think you can give me a shot to just at least read the news. Not give me a show yet, because obviously I'm quite new, but let me read the news. And lo and behold, they allowed me to read the news. And first thing they said, Lerato, you speak way too fast. You need to slow down. There's no way you can get a show. You need to slow down. You dictate. You need to speak slower. You need to speak clear. You need to read more so you understand what current affairs is. Because sometimes you can hear that when someone asks you a question after a news story, you are literally just reciting the news piece and have no idea what's happening in current affairs. So first lesson I learned is that as a journalist, you've got to read. And I learned that not at SABC, but at a small community radio station with probably 1,000 people at that time called Kingfish FM. Soon after that, they were like, okay, we are happy, but it took me a good 6-8 months of doing that news and producing news and having this hunger, obviously, to actually present a show, because I was just like, I can talk. These people just talk, and that's all they do for 3 hours, talk, laugh, and have fun. Surely I can do that. So then they were like, okay, let's give you a shot. Let's put you in the breakfast show, and you can be a co-host, and we can see if you can talk then. And if for anyone who knows, being on a breakfast show is huge. Because I felt like I was a radio presenter on Metro FM. It was like the biggest thing since sliced bread in my life then. And I was on the breakfast show for some time. And I might just add that this whole time, while I'm producing news, while I'm making tea, while I'm eventually reading news, while I get to the breakfast show, I'm not being paid anything. I am finding my way to Kingfish FM because my parents are just like, if you want to do what we tell you to do, then you're going to have to find your own way. So during the day, I am doing the breakfast show in the morning. After that, race home, change into my gear, and then I waitress the whole day up till 10 o'clock at night. And then again in the morning, I'm up for the breakfast show. So that was my life for a good 6 months. Work in the morning, waitressing at night to sustain myself. Then after some time, they were happy, gave me a show at Kingfish FM, and that really went well. And then after some time, I just felt like, you know what, it was a Christian radio station. I wanted to commercialize myself and just make sure that I can reach people that are not necessarily just Christians and see if I can do well in that. Because obviously I don't want to be a Christian radio show presenter. I wanted to be on TV and be able to present on anything, music, current affairs, anything, and wanted to widen my reach in terms of that. So then I went to Bay FM, got there as well. They were like, we're happy that you did a show at Kingfish FM, but this is Bay FM and the fish is definitely much bigger here. So then I went to Bay FM. There they gave me a show after like 8 months of reading news as well. I co-hosted the Top 40 show with a guy on a Saturday while still waitressing, because obviously, like I said, that also at Bay FM, I was not being paid. I was volunteering. From Bay FM to my house is a good 20 minutes, and my parents were making me walk. I think low-key they're trying to make me really believe this thing was not going to work, because I felt the pain of walking every single day to Bay FM and working in a show where you know the listenership is so low, is so discouraging. So for instance, I would say, people must call into my show and give me your comments. And literally this one granny, I think, who would listen to my show would be the one person who would be like, I'm still here in my little corner. And I've got you. For like 8 months, I had one person listening to me. You can imagine how discouraging that was. But from then I moved, while I was at Bay FM, I heard that, I got a call actually that I was headhunted to produce shows on Bay TV. So at that time, there wasn't Bay TV that you have now, which is our only community TV station that we have now. It was going to be launched then. And then they asked me to be one of the producers, and I went to interviews and I was selected in that. And then within 2 or 3 months while I was there producing shows in a very, very tough environment, we had telephones that didn't work. We had to interview people that were CEOs of companies. The show that I produced was called Around the Bay, where I had to find established business people, top CEOs, and ask them to come on my show. And I can't even call them, and I have to send them a voice note. And at that time, it was so unprofessional, but we had no resources. Sometimes we had to share cars to go to stories because there's only one car. And we're only being paid, I think, 1.2 or so like that. And that had to cater to my transport, to everything else. And at that time, I had to stop waitressing because the show would make me work from 8 until probably sometimes 9 o'clock at night. And then after that, I got into SABC through an internship. But I think, like I always tell people, I could never take back what I learned in those 8 years. It may look like simple things, but once I got to SABC, having a good work ethic became easy, because while I was at Kingfish FM at a breakfast show, I knew that call time was 5 o'clock. How I got to Kingfish at 5 was up to me. But I had to know that come 5 o'clock, we are sitting, we are going through our show, and we are talking who's going to do what. So already at a community radio station level, I understood the importance of time management. That when they say the news must be read at 8, it must be 8 o'clock. It can't be 10 past, it can't be half past, it must be 8 o'clock. Then I also understood the importance of just working hard, and the importance of giving your best, and the importance of excellence in your craft, no matter how small of a station you're working for. Like I said, at Bay FM, I had one listener for about 2 years. And someone else would be like, why give your best when one person's listening to you? Who even cares about Bay FM, the bigger scheme of things where there's other radio stations? But I understood the importance of giving my best in the little that was given to me at that time, because what I did then and the excellence that I gave then is the excellence that I give now. So most of the times when you go to community radio stations, because of this discouragement sometimes of these radio stations, it's easy to flag. I mean, I worked with people who didn't do cue sheets, who didn't prepare properly for their shows, and it was okay for them. But I knew that ultimately I want to get into SABC, and at SABC there's times where they say you're crossing at 8, you've got to be live at 8 because there's a minister standing next to you. If they say that they want a script at this time, you've got to get it in, otherwise your story will not make the air, and then you're going to get even into more trouble. So there are fundamental things, good work ethic, time management, excellence in my craft, no matter how small it seemed at that time. Reading up on current affairs, no matter how small of an audience I had then, was important. And when I look back on the 8 years I served in community radio stations, there are certain things that I learned, principles that I now apply at SABC that have allowed me 10 years in to have 6 awards within 10 years of my career, which means that most year I've got an award ever since I've been here. And I always tell people that yes, it's because I've done well as a journalist, but there are things, are small principles, small things that I learned within the community radio stations that helped me now at SABC as an established journalist to stand out among the rest. So I always encourage people. I know it's discouraging to be in a small radio station. I know it's tough when you don't have cameras. I know it's tough when you are this talented person. You know what, I can do it. I really deserve to be on Metro. I deserve to be at SABC, but there are no opportunities coming. I've learned that it is the excellence, the consistency, the intentionality to be good all the time at your work where you are now that opens doors for you. I always give an example that God is not crazy. He rewards excellence. He rewards consistency. And sometimes the doors are being closed because in the little that you've been given, you're taking it for granted. In the little that you've been given, you are slacking. In the little that you've been given, you are giving half measure and being mediocre. And exactly what you're doing now at the radio station, you're going to do at SABC, and it's going to cost you more. So rather invest in your craft now, rather sharpen the skills now. When they pick up things that you're not good at, don't look down on your boss and be like, who cares? Who listens to us? Listens to criticism, take it so well, perfect your craft now, because at the top, you can't, I can't make a mistake in a life crossing. It will trend and that will kill my career. But I can do it at Kingfisher FM because it's a learning ground. I can harness my craft bit. So make the best of where you are now and give your best. And I promise you it's going to be worth it. When, not even if, when you reach the top.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for that, Lerato. You know, I grabbed onto God is not crazy. I was listening to something, to an audio recently where John was speaking to his disciples and saying, you receive what has been, only God has given you. So what he had received is what had been given. You know what I mean? Because sometimes people will think that you don't deserve something, it shouldn't be yours. And that is what he was dealing with. And you're saying God is not crazy. He gives. And he knows why he gives it to you. So very well done and very well spoken on that. And that working on your craft, do not despise small beginnings. And that is what you're really talking about. There's a book and research work around grit. And it always says hard work and grit will always beat talent anytime. You can have natural talent, but if you do not work on it, it's not going to get you anywhere. And that is the gist of what I got from you, Lerato, that it's grit and perseverance. So thank you so much for that. Thank you. Let's give Lerato a round of applause. So we're swiftly going to move on to Nico Koza, the Chief Marketing Officer at Completely Agency and former news editor of Soweto TV. Nico, we're all yours.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I'm aware that time is quite limited, so I'll just try to summarize some of my journey. But essentially, I'm just going to be speaking about women in leadership, particularly in the community media space. But I also just want to encourage you as well and just give you a little bit of my story with how I started. So I'm also under under the age of 30. So I also wasn't here 30 years ago, but here we are today, right? And there's been quite significant transformation that's happened in the community media space, and I've been very privileged to be part of that transformation, right? So I matriculated, and I'm going to give away a little bit, a rough estimate of my age, but I matriculated in 2014. And when I matriculated, I didn't know what I wanted to do. Honestly, I was like, I'm going to take a gap year. And you know, when you get home and your parents are like, there's no child of mine taking a gap year in this house, you know? So I was then really thrust into deciding what it is I wanted to do with my life. And so I entered a competition called Miss Teen Soweto, because I was still a teen at the time. I matriculated, I think I was around 17, and then I won the competition, and I was like, oh, great, now I can give back to my community. You know, I can give back to young girls in my community. I can show them that, you know, it's possible, your dreams are valid. And that time I'm still like 18, you know, none of my dreams have really materialized at that stage in time yet. So then I decided, I heard about a learnership that took place at Soweto TV, and mind you, a learnership and internship are two different things, right? So a learnership is where obviously they'll just take you through teaching you first for a period of a few months. And then after, I think it was about 6 months, you then would go into the workplace to try get some workplace experience. And from there, it's goodbye. If you stay, you kind of stay. If you don't stay, then you have to try find a different avenue. So I then applied for this learnership, and I was like, look, I'm at home anyway. I've always wanted to be in TV. I've always known that I'm going to be in television, but I'm not too sure how to go about it. So I was like, okay, let me enter this learnership. I entered it. It was for 12 months, and towards the end of our 12 months, and it was during that time where, you know, you start learning about professionalism, like one of our questions, where you understand that you can't go to a protest story in a miniskirt, right? It's like they're barricading the roads, they are burning tires. You need to be running, you need to be cautious. You know, if anything gets thrown your direction, you need to be able to duck and dive. Wearing a miniskirt during that is not gonna be to your benefit, you know? So I started learning certain things like those. And then about maybe at the end of my internship, they said to me, hey, we love the way that you write, we love your work ethic. We think that we might want to offer you a position for you to kind of stay, so don't leave. You know, during your time, you've been very proactive. You've gone into the production space, you've gone into the news space, because I had a very inquisitive mind, and that's what I want to employ you guys on, right? Don't just go into, I mean, Taho mentioned so amazingly how there's different elements in media. It's not just the TV host, it's not just the producer, but there's people on the back end, and those positions need to be filled. So I then, I got the job. About 2 years in, our news editor then left. But what I was then doing is I was already shadowing her. So whenever she would do scripts, I'll take the scripts, sit down at home and go through, okay, why is she saying this? Why is she using this word instead of this? Why are they using the barricaded roads with burning tires as opposed to they shut the road, right? So you start learning the terminology, but that was all on me. No, she didn't take my hand and say, okay, Nyiko, I want to teach you. Yes, those elements were there, but I would then, in my spare time, sit down, check how my writing is, understand what creating a headline means. A headline needs to be catchy, understanding fact verifying, you know, so when she left, I then kind of assumed the headship role of the newsroom, and that's where quite a lot of things for me and my journey started unraveling, where, you know, you're now sitting at an exco level. You're young, you're 22 years old, you've never really sat at an exco level. The oldest person on the table in the room is 10 years older than you, right? So now you're a young woman, you're in journalism, but you also need to make your voice heard. And so luckily enough, when I kind of came in, the person who was managing the newsroom at the time was female. So the transition of me coming in, being female, was easy. And so when I left, I also left a female in charge, right? So with regards to the TV space, there definitely has been quite a lot of transformation with regards to letting women come in and sit at the table, but also to teach other young women that are coming in on the fort. And so I ran that newsroom, and as Lerato was just speaking about how your community media, guys, at times it can be really, really tough, but it's so rewarding, right? Because you get there, there's no car. You need to deploy journalists to stories because at 1 o'clock, news must go live. at 1 o'clock, it can't come 1 o'clock and you're like, oh, sorry, please can we have 10 more minutes because we're not ready. You all know when you tune into news and it's 1 o'clock, it's supposed to be playing at 1 o'clock. So it teaches you quite a lot of time management, quite a lot of working under pressure and fact verifying a lot of your stories. So going into that, that's basically how I applied my trade, SOE2 TV, understanding that if there aren't enough cameras, how are you deploying your resources? You know, how are you, I always used to say to the team, we actually make magic happen literally, because when the time comes for news to go on air, the time has come, and we used to make that happen. And so after quite a few years within the TV space and being a news editor, I then decided, look, most of the power, and I know I know there's time, but most of the decisions are actually made behind the screens. So how do I then look at becoming a producer? And I think this is where, you know, my kind of change came in, where I started learning, okay, I've taken a gap year from school, I'm now working. How do I not leave the work environment in order to go to school and then come out of school and not be unemployed, right? So I was battling with that to say, I've already found a job, it's not paying me a lot of money, you know, it's literally paying me very little, but do I leave the work environment to try go get an education only to try come back in it, or do I stay in the work environment? And I decided to stay in the work environment while pursuing my degree part-time. So what happened was now I'm working full-time, but I'm going to school in the evenings because I'm trying to chase that degree, you know, and I want to, when I walk into a room, be able to say, hey, this is the work that I've done, but these are the qualifications that back me up, you know. So I then had to make that sacrifice of work, literally waking up 6 o'clock because you're chasing stories, literally then 5 o'clock when it's knock off time, I'm putting someone else in charge, rushing to school and getting into class, which only ends at 9. And then rushing from Wits back home, and literally then at home knowing, okay, cool, now I need to do my schoolwork, you know. So I just want to implore you that some of these options are available, and at times, while we do have stakeholders, while we do have government, sometimes, and if not all the time, the onus is on you. No one is going to come and save you. No one is going to, in as much as, you know, government does need to play its part, our stakeholders do need to play their part. At times, it becomes about you and how badly you want it and what you're willing to do in order to make sure that if there's a door, you will knock on that door, and if it doesn't knock, you will bang it down, right? And that's very figuratively speaking, but that's how I kind of did it. And then through my years at Soweto TV, I then decided, I want to start going into content creation. And so they then said, look, you've also got a really good eye for content. Why don't you come into our content department? Our content department at the time needed some help. And when I made the switch to content, after I think about a year or so, I was like, actually, I want to explore content. And that's how I then diverted into becoming a content director. Because a lot of the times when I was at Soweto TV, how I then made that work for me was I had my own show. So I then created a talk show, which was called The Power Circle. And like Ulerato said, there you are the producer, you are the director, you are the researcher, you are all of these things because you don't have a team. It's community media. You yourself have to make a full-on show happen. And so when I left Soweto TV, I then moved to Date My Family, where I was the content director for season 11 there, and then moved on to then opening Incompletely Agency, right, which is a digital communications and brand agency now. And now that is what I run. But just to fully speak about just a little bit of what Tejo mentioned, there are quite a lot of value chains within the media space, which, you know, you need to be aware of. There's TVs, there's content directing, there's producing, there's being a scriptwriter, there's being a copywriter. Within journalism, yes, there's the reporter, but there's also the researcher at the back. There's the person who is cueing the cameras, right? So really decide where it is you want to place yourself, and with grit and determination and a whole lot of hard work and excellency, you'll make it. Thank you.
That is another wow. Thank you so much for that, Nico. Truly, truly, truly inspiring. She spoke about working and studying at the same time. I hung on to the onus is on you. And that's the question we keep asking. Who is responsible? It is on you. So you have to drive. And there's a common thread between these stories that you have to be able to make it work. There's grit, there's perseverance. You got to push hard. Nobody's going to push you. There'll be obstacles. There'll be things that are going to be happening. So you've got to be able to push those through. So thank you very much for that. Really inspiring stories. There may be questions maybe from the audience. I'll allow one or two comments or questions from you guys that you may have for Lerato or Nico, Nico, that we may be able to that they may respond to on around their journey. So are there any comments or questions? Okay, thank you very much. There's one hand there. That's one hand going once, there's a second hand here. Those are our first and second hand, going once, going twice. There's a third hand, going twice, going 3 times, and we are closed. And those are the only 3 questions we'll be taking at this point, 1, 2, and 3 in that order. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Hello to the panelists. My name is Gloria. I am an integrated communication student at the communications department in Soshanguve. So my question really ricochets of the conversation that I really felt was a little open-ended between Carol and Hofato, and it also connects with a question I want to ask Lerato. So we were talking about changing the conversation, and I think you also, Melissa also commented on it, that it's in our hands, that we should take this new media, digital media, content creation in our hands, because right now, structures and boards like MDDA and GCIS do not have a structure for us. So now my question, for, I'll say myself, someone who is a content creator in the new media, on social media, podcast space, how then do we now change the conversation to say, you said, I'll say this again, you said that it's back in our hands. So I want to take it back to you and say, you said that we should have like code of conducts and policies so that we don't have vulgar language on our platforms and all of that. But now, I think the problem with that is it looks like, or it feels like to me, that you, as the people who have a significant amount of authority and power and information about policies and code of conduct, are not doing enough catalytic action. What I mean by that is, how is it that there is no code of conduct or standard that you are putting out there to creators that this is what we would fund you based on as content creators, that create your code of conduct, create your policies based on what we release for you? Because now if you say, come up with a code of conduct and we'll tell you if it's according to the criteria, and what then happens after that is, no, it's not in line with the criteria. So why is it that the government is not having or these boards that exist, why are they not coming up with a code of conduct that can be used as a standard? And I say it will connect with Lerato's story, because she said she, I think it's a privilege that you had a radio station that was close by that you could walk to and be able to start your career and you know, work all through those 8 years to get to where you are. So now, what if my position is, my privilege is I have a great phone, I have great content, I think, or I am receiving feedback from the socials, from digital media, that this content can actually be something. So that's my position at the moment, but I still want to go through mainstream, the mainstream route. But now my problem is, I can't just go through the mainstream routes because I don't have that privilege of being close to home, having a radio that is close enough to my house. But I do have other resources that I can start on a digital platform that can even become a source of income for myself while I carve a career in, say, a community radio somewhere further from home, to be able to survive and sustain myself while I'm building the career that I actually want.
Okay,
So
I'm gonna jump in there very quickly because your question has and comment. It's so you're gonna. I'm starting to try and figure out what the actual question is, and so we probably, before we go to number 2 and 3, we're gonna see how we can dissect that entire content, because a lot of that stuff that you were throwing in there. So we do want to give everyone an opportunity as well. So maybe let's ask the panel. I think I took something around code of conduct that was spoken there about the issue of why there's no policy or code that speaks to new media. That's probably what's coming there. But maybe even at some point, Seho or someone or Carol can speak to the issues of BCCSA, because there are code of conducts that exist. But maybe you can touch on some of that. And the reason I'm cutting is because there's a whole lot of issues that you're bringing forward, and we do want to be able to address the other ladies as well with the time constraint.
My biggest question is with them. So I just thought there was a connect. That's why I talked to Larato as well. But my biggest question is to them, that why do they not come up with this code of conduct or standards for a code of conduct that they expect from people who have podcasts and they produce online, so that, yes.
Okay, maybe let's deal with that. So if you can touch it on it, Carol.
Okay, that was a bit weird. No, I get your question, but we also have to understand how these things work. So for a code of conduct, we don't impose it on the people that are in the sector. They have to take a decision to come together and agree on a standard. So the same applies with the Press Council of South Africa, where different newspapers decided that it's even a voluntary system. So we do have one media house that doesn't even subscribe to the press code, which is the Independent News. So they came together and said, we together are going to abide to this conduct. And then we also know with the BCCSA, that one is quite different because it's regulated. There's regulations. There's the Broadcasting Act that forces broadcasters to actually come together and have an independent system that overlooks their operations. So with podcasters, I think the role that we can play as MDDA, and you are quite correct, we could assist and facilitate conversations amongst yourselves, but we cannot impose a code of conduct to you. We can assist you guys by bringing you guys together, by giving you guys the best practices, things that have been done in other countries where such spaces have their own independent bodies. We could assist with that, but we do not have the authority to impose a code of conduct on you guys. So that's how it actually works, and it's important that maybe it's a conversation we can do. It's also not limiting. You guys don't even have to wait for MDDA. I've seen what the Mapion guys have done. They had an Africa Summit about 2 weeks ago, and they were talking about their own space and how they would like their space to be structured, how they're struggling with music rights and whatsoever. And there's nothing stopping you guys from trying to have those conversations. I guess it will depend on the footprints different podcasters have and the directions that they want to take. But it's something that is doable, and it's something perhaps we should start having a conversation with those guys. And there's a lot of guys that are coming up that have good content that are online. Again, it goes back to how are you branding yourselves? I've seen government actually purchasing certain adverts from these podcasters. So it's a discussion for another day. I think we should be encouraging another session just to.
So I am worried about now the time element. So what we're going to do, we will take those 2 questions, right? But please keep them short, ladies, very short. That's the one thing. The second thing is we're going to go out and have a photo shoot, right? Once we are done with the photo shoot, you will then network with the panelists. We'll all be there, have a 10, 15 minutes engagement, networking and moving around. Then you probably release you for lunch. I know I'm doing announcements before the actual closure, but I think just to allay your fears, we'll create an opportunity for engagement. I'll add that into the program. So please don't run off. We'll do the photo shoot. After the photo shoot, we'll network. There are 2 sets of photo shoots. There's the panelists, and then there's the one with everyone. Once those are done, let's network for about 15 minutes before everyone goes to their lunch spaces. So let's take those 2 very quick questions, and then we close. Very quickly, the lady in the green baseball jacket.
Thank you so much. My name is Sevia Mkansi. I come from the Department of Journalism. My question is very simple. It's for Miss Nico Mkosa. Sorry. I heard you talking about how everything behind your success. So what I wanted you to brief me about was, how did you, except for time management, how did you manage studying and working at the very same time? That's what I want you to brief me about. Thank you.
Second question, the last question. I think it was the pink jacket. Yes.
Good day. My name is Olga. I'm from the Integrated Communications Studies. My question is about, how does mainstream organization view the credibility and impact of work done in the community media?
Please repeat that.
How does Media Streams organization view the impact of work done in the community media?
Okay, so maybe let's have a quick response from Nico, and then I think it was Carol who wanted to take the other one. Okay, Nico.
Okay, I didn't get your name. I just heard Mkansi, so I'm gonna call you Miss Mkansi. Is that fine? Okay, so I think with me, the one thing that really helped me manage was because I knew that I was not supposed to stay where I was. And I don't know if I can't make it any more real, right, than the fact that I wanted better for myself. And I knew that the only way I could get better is if there were no excuses coming from my side. So I kind of had to do everything I needed to do to make sure my own back was okay. And don't get me wrong, it was difficult. There were times I didn't submit, assignments on time. There were times I went to bed crying because I would pull an all-nighter, and an assignment is due at 8 a.m. in the morning, but I really only got to the body of that assignment at 9 at night because I just left school. So you're correct, Jess, things that people always talk about, time management, Jess, manage your time, but the real reason is your why, and if you really do want not to be where you are. So the one thing I'd always say to myself is, how do I finish my degree in record time, but how do I make sure that next year, this time, I'm not at the same place that I was? And even if it's just to move a little bit, even if it's just to pass 2 modules, or get an A in those 2 cycle tests, for me, the fact that I wanted to be the woman that I am today and the woman that I'm becoming was honestly my motivation. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nico. So you guys can engage even after the session, and you can further have those comments. Carol?
Mainstream does take community seriously, and one evidence of that is how they actually would be poaching journalists from community media. So if they had not been taking them seriously, they would not be looking out for the Leratos out there. Mm-hmm. So they do take it seriously, and some of the biggest stories that mainstream actually would run with are stories that were first broken by community journalists.
For that, thank you very much, Carol. Ladies and gentlemen, before I hand over for our closing remarks, I've got 2 more prizes to give away. So, quick quiz. When Lerato was speaking, she spoke about the first lesson that she learned as a journalist. One of those. Okay, there's a hand up there. So what was that? So what do you need to do and why? That's the lady over there in the corner. No, sorry, you in the jacket, yes.
Oh, okay. She said the first lesson that you have to learn is you have to read to be a good journalist.
Why do you need to read?
I can mention my own read.
You can?
For your own vocabulary, you can improve in a lot of things. Reading opens your mind, it makes you open-minded, and it encourages you to ask questions. It encourages you to ask why. Thank you.
Okay, we will take that because she got creative. You have to read because if you're a journalist, you need to know current affairs. So opening up your mind and those new opportunities. Research is critical. Okay, last question. When Tseho was talking, she spoke about the GCIS and some of the work that they do. Who remembers what how GCIS assists women and provides those opportunities? What are some of those areas that Tseho had mentioned? This hand, that hand, no, what I think that hand answered before. Let's try that other hand in white over there that went up, and then we'll come back to the hand that answered before if we don't get that answer. Tseho, you'll assist.
Well, I'm not sure. My name is Bonolo Musi from the integrated department, but I think she said that they give opportunities to newly graduates by the community media.
Entirely. So the first part is correct in terms of how we take a lot of interns and work integrated learners that are female. So I don't know if you want to take that.
Okay, so let's get maybe a finish off from there. The taking in of graduates. Let's hear what is in the corner there.
Hello everyone, I'm back again. So I'm just going to add on what she said. You spoke about taking journalism, women, females, manaba journalism, giving them opportunities in the department and exposing them and giving them more opportunities, like training them, offering them more skills, I guess.
Okay. Let's try those hands over there.
Hi, my name is Vita Pomishime, and I'm a second year in the Department of Integrated Communication. So one of the things that she mentioned is, aside from looking at world students that are female, thanks to the Equity Act, lots of the people that they try to employ will also be female. Also things like race, they'll look at race is also one of the things that makes them different. So it was the Equity Act that assists in that. She also mentioned the fact that I think there was someone who was outgoing before that, and they facilitated sort of like some sort of a networking event. She was a female, and they invited other females to sit with her and talk and have a chat. And also the next person that was coming through was also a female. So that's my 2 cents.
He is talking about Usis Pumla, the former DG at the GCIS, who was the first female DG, and what they facilitated was a session for everyone to come sit and listen and have conversations with Usis Pumla, and then they brought in another DG. That is probably our closest answer to some. So everyone was female. Yes, they brought people in, but the fact that you spoke about bringing in and having the conversations with Usis Pumla was very critical. I thought you would have talked about the incubation of some of those some of the companies and the women and assisting them. So there's a whole lot of the information that was there. But that engagement was important, and why it's important is the networking we were talking about and passing the baton. So that I think that we will be able to take that question. Thank you very much and congratulations. I think we've reached the end of our prizes, if I'm not mistaken. So at this point, ladies and gentlemen, I will ask for our closing remarks. So Upeliswa Sibati from the GCIS, I think there's a podium here, Peliswa, will then provide us with our vote of thanks and closing remarks. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you very much to everyone who has attended this session today, and happy Women's Day in advance. On behalf of the GCIS, we would like to thank everyone, their partners, GIZ, MDDA, TUT. From 2022, we are still continuing. MDDA, you joined us last year. We look forward to many more of such engagements with yourselves, contributing immensely to the program that GCIS so values. And GIZ, we have been pushing the GBVF program with yourselves, doing many of these dialogues, these panel discussions with other stakeholders. You are here today, we are still continuing, and we appreciate that. And thank you so much to the program director. You kept us captivated. You kept us engaged and very efficient. Thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your lessons in how we conducted this session. Lerato, you've been very patient with us. I hope you can hear online. We had glitches, but you stayed on, and you gave us so much to chew on. You imparted so much lessons to all of us, not only the students of TUT, but to all of us. We learned that small beginnings can lead to bigger things. We must not despise them. We must give our best at every opportunity that we are given. Nico, you came all the way from Soweto and contributed your time to empower the young people, the future leaders, the future communications and media practitioners of this country. Thank you so much for the lessons that you have imparted. Thank you so much for answering the call. By the way, let me tell you something. All these panelists that are here, no one is being paid. They are donating their time for your empowerment. And we really appreciate that. I hope today you leave really empowered, really inspired. Lastly, I want to say and repeat what Sekofato said. Through this initiative, the GCIS aims to bring change from the grassroots level. Let us continue to build. Let us continue to empower each other and appreciate what we are given today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Peliswa. Ladies and gentlemen, let's just give a round of applause to the GCIS themselves for organizing this. Really, truly appreciating, and obviously TUT for hosting us. Power to TUT. And as we close, the session is declared officially closed. We will go through the doors. We'll follow Peliswa and we'll be taking the photos. And then we can network for about 10, 15 minutes. Then everyone goes off to lunch. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon and happy Women's Month. Woo!